Chapter 154. Yuru, are you really not the one who spread the rumor? After saying this, Qin Huaiyong's eyes immediately became strange and deep, and he asked Qin Yuru, "Father, it's really not me." Qin Yuru didn't react as fast as Madame D. Hearing Qin Huaiyong's question, a trace of pride flashed in her eyes. She didn't believe that her father would punish her if she didn't say anything. Anyway, it was really not her who spread the rumor. Those misses were curious and sent their servants to inquire about it from her servants. Then it's your servants who spread the rumor. Later, each of them will go to the supervisor and receive 10 strokes of the stick, and they will be fined half a year's salary. Qin Huaiyong said decisively. "Father!" Qin Yuru screamed in shock. She was almost stunned. She never thought that Qin Huaiyong would punish all the servants around her. This was like beating everyone to death with a stick. How could she support her trusted people in the future? If anyone dares to spread the rumor in the future, directly sell them out. Our mansion doesn't need such servants who gossip. Qin Huaiyong stood up with a cold face. "General, Yuru doesn't know anything." Madame D wanted to help Qin Yuru and also stood up. "Well, it's been a long time. Go back, I'm tired." Qin Huaiyong didn't allow her to say more and said with a cold face. After that, he bowed to old grandma who had been silent and then walked out. When he walked to the door, he seemed to think of something. After looking back at Shui Rulin carefully, his eyes became gentle. "Rulin, take good care of yourself. I'll assign you 2 more old maids. I'll ask someone to bring them to you later." "Thank you, cousin." Shui Rulin stood up and bowed to him. Qin Huaiyong nodded and glanced at Qin Wanru. He wanted to say something but didn't say it in the end. He just moved his lips and then turned around and strode away. "Father!" Qin Yuru didn't want to give up and wanted to chase after him, but Madame D stopped her. Feeling the sweat in Madame D's hand, Qin Yuru gritted her teeth and actually calmed down. "Mother, I'm going to find Grandma." Qin Yuru turned around and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Of course, this was to remind the servants present that she was the granddaughter of Duke Yong's mansion. She was not willing to let Qin Wanru gain the upper hand. Ever since she knew that she was her father's only daughter, Qin Yuru became more and more arrogant. She felt that Qin Wanru was just an illegitimate child who came from nowhere and was not worthy to be mentioned in the same breath as her. Seeing Qin Wanru calling Madame D mother affectionately without knowing anything, Madame D always felt that she was watching a joke. Did such a lowly person deserve to have the same mother as her? Now she was suppressed by the bastard that she despised the most. How could she not be angry? She didn't really want to go to Duke Yong's mansion. She just wanted to let them know that her maternal grandfather was from Duke Yong's mansion and that Qin Wanru, a wild child picked up from nowhere, couldn't compare with her. "You, don't cry. If someone is really stirring up trouble between you and Wanru, of course, he will be punished." Madame D also knew that the words that she unconsciously drew out were bad. Since Qin Wanru said it through her words, she knew that it was going to be bad. Sure enough, Qin Huaiyong punished Qin Yuru's people without saying anything. She was extremely resentful in her heart, but she couldn't show it on her face. She pulled a smile and said to Shui Rulin, "Sister, please take care of the affairs in the mansion. I will call Yuru's people over, and you can punish them and tell them the rules." Now it was Shui Rulin who was in charge of the mansion, so it was reasonable for Shui Rulin to take care of this matter. Madame D and Shui Rulin were originally at odds. If Madame D's people were beaten by Shui Rulin, they would definitely dislike Shui Rulin more and be more loyal to Madame D. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. Madame D was really good. In a moment, she thought of a countermeasure. No wonder she was so powerful in Qin's mansion for so many years, and even old grandma couldn't resist her edge. Seeing that Shui Rulin was about to speak, she reached out and pulled Shui Rulin's sleeve, motioning her to let her do it. "Madam, this matter is ordered by my father. Naturally, we should go to the supervisor of the outer court to receive punishment. We can also let the servants of the inner court watch the punishment, so that those who talk nonsense dare not to talk nonsense next time. Otherwise, next time it will not be a simple punishment of flogging and a penalty of salary." Qin Wanru raised her head and said with a smile, "If it was the punishment of the inner court, It was indeed Shui Ruolin who asked people to carry out the punishment. However, it was Qin Huaiyong who said that they should be punished, so it could be regarded as the matter of the outer court, and the supervisor of the outer court was Qin Huaiyong's people. But if so, it would seem that Madame D sent people out to be punished, instead of Shui Ruolin deliberately finding fault to beat Madame D's people because she disliked them. The meaning of this was completely different. If it is the matter of the inner court, why not ask Madame Shui? Why bother father's people? Qin Yuru also heard the twists and turns in it and immediately said, "But it is obviously father's order, not mother who wants to beat people." Qin Wanru's eyes flashed and said, "Hey, how can you say that?" Qin Yuru was furious. "I said what father said just now, am I wrong?" Qin Wanru's eyes were slightly cold. Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned red. When she was about to say something, old grandma interrupted her rudely. "Are you done? If you are done, leave me. I am also tired here. If you can't argue clearly, go to Huaiyong to argue. He should not be far away now, let a servant go to find him." She said this calmly, and it was the first time since Qin Wanru came in that old grandma spoke, but the impatience was clearly expressed. Even if Madame D and her daughter wanted to pester Qin Wanru, with old grandma's words, they could not say anything more. Madame D took a deep breath and showed a trace of a smile on her face. "Mother, Yuru and I will leave immediately. What do you think about the matter we talked about before, Mother?" She knew that if she said anything at this time, it would only make old grandma angry, or even really call Qin Huaiyong here. It was not appropriate to confront force with force at this time, so Madame D cleverly changed the topic and mentioned the matter they came to talk to old grandma about. "It's up to you." Old grandma closed her eyes weakly. There was a trace of paleness in her yellowish face, and it was obvious that she was not in good spirits. Moreover, old grandma sat there without saying a word just now, so she should be in a bad mood. "Mother, it's good that you agreed. Then Yuru and I will go back first." Seeing that she had achieved her goal, Madame D was not in the mood to argue with Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin. After bowing to Madame Dowager, he pulled Qin Yuru, who was unwilling, to bow to her as well, and then left with Qin Yuru. After waiting for them to leave, Shui Ruolin asked anxiously, "Mother, what did you promise, sister?" Madame D's reaction was very strange. She could even bear the fact that Qin Yuru's people were going to be punished. It seemed that she wanted something big. Shui Ruolin was worried that Madame D would do harm to old grandma. "She wants a few more newly bought shops in the mansion." Old grandma sneered, and also agreed. Just now, Qin Huaiyong accompanied Madame D here for the new shop in the mansion. He said that if Madame D wanted to marry into Duke Yong's mansion, the dowry must be a must. Marrying into a high position should not be looked down upon. They talked a lot and Qin Yuru came back crying. "What about Madame's own shops?" Qin Wanru keenly sensed what was going on and asked. "It is said that Duke Yong's mansion has been in charge of the shops these years when she was not in the capital city. I didn't expect that the manager thought that Madame D was not in the capital city for so many years, so he didn't pay so much attention to the shops, and the shops became less and less. These years, not only did they not make profits, but they even lost money." Old grandma said tiredly. Not only her body, but also her heart. She didn't have some ideas before, but now she did. However, what she saw made her more and more disappointed. Madame D endlessly asked for something, relying on Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru thought of something and asked, "Grandma, haven't you returned these shops?" "Yes, we will return them soon, but we need to sort out the account books first. When the time comes, we will bring the account books to let Madame D and your mother have a look and stamp them. After that, the shops will be our mansion's business. But they have been losing money, so there is not much use for them to stay." Old grandma said, "Why do we need my mother to have a look?" Qin Wanru asked confusedly. These account books were all things in Madame D's dowry. She could have a look at them herself, but why did she drag Shui Ruolin into it? She felt strange when Madame D became so generous. "This is your father's idea, and I heard that because of the loss, we still owe Duke Yong's mansion a lot of money. When we figure it out, we still have to return the money that Duke Yong's mansion supplemented for us. The more old grandma thought about it, the angrier she became. She also had a dowry, and she had a lot of dowry in those years. She really didn't believe Madame D's words. It was okay that the dowry shop suffered a loss, but how could there be such a thing as subsidizing the loss? If it was really so bad, Qin Wanru could write to Madame D and let her deal with it. There was no need to continue to block money. Duke Yong's mansion was so rich that they were willing to subsidize the loss of the shop of a married daughter. Moreover, this was done without the other party's knowledge. Duke Yong's mansion really treated them as fools. But even if they knew something was wrong, they had no evidence, so they could only let Duke Yong's mansion extort them. The money in the outer court's account was used to buy new shops and some gifts from Qin Huayong when he was in the capital city. Old grandma was rich in the inner court, so she wanted the inner court to pay the account. Now it was Shui Rulin who was in charge, so the inner court's account had to be checked by Shui Rulin. There were many twists and turns in it, and old grandma thought that Qin Wanru couldn't understand it. At this time, she was so angry that she couldn't help saying it. "Grandma, can I accompany my mother to check the account at that time? My mother can't afford to work hard now." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and took the job. Unexpectedly, there was such a thing, which saved her a lot of trouble. She had long felt that there was something wrong with Madame D's dowry, and she wanted to knock a brick to attract jade. Now the brick was sent to her, how could she refuse it? Madame D was so generous, probably because she thought it was a useless brick? Old grandma also thought that Qin Wanru's concerns were reasonable, and nodded repeatedly. "Okay, you can accompany your mother at that time." Her little granddaughter was getting smarter and smarter. Old grandma thought that it would be better for her to fight against the cunning and greedy Madame D. Chapter 155. The first account? Madame Dowager couldn't remember what Qin Wanru was talking about and asked, "Mother, Wanru should be talking about the gift list when my sister got married, right?" Shui Rulin responded quickly and immediately understood and explained, "Of course." Madame Dowager turned to look at Nanny Duan. She had always asked Nanny Duan to keep some important things. When a woman married into her husband's family, there would be a gift list sent to her husband's family. When her husband's family received the dowry, they would count it and put it into the account. "Madame Dowager, there is a list. I have been keeping it for you." Nanny Duan thought carefully and said. She naturally didn't dare to omit such an important thing. Even before she came to the capital city, she deliberately brought this list with her. When they were in Jiangzhou, Madame D had been talking about the money of those shops and said that it was the money in her dowry. When they arrived in the capital city, she might say something else. With this gift list, at least it could be a proof. "That's good. Grandma, you can give this list to Mother first. If something happens to Madame D because of these things, Mother can be prepared." Qin Wanru suggested calmly. Every time Madame D talked about her dowry, Shui Rulin had nothing to say. After all, she didn't know what happened at that time. Even if she wanted to say something, she couldn't get to the point. Madame Dowager couldn't always have the energy to accompany Madame D. The best way was to put this list in front of Shui Rulin so that she could see through it. In this way, even if Madame D wanted to do something, she had to think it over. Moreover, she wanted to use this gift list to remove the mask of Duke Yong's mansion. "Okay, I will ask Nanny Duan to send the list to your mother later." Madame Dowager thought for a while and understood Qin Wanru's meaning. She nodded with a smile on her face and said. After the discussion, Madame Dowager sent Shui Rulin to have a rest. She was pregnant and went out to meet guests. At this time, she looked a little tired. Shui Rulin couldn't stand it anymore, so she stood up and said goodbye to Madame Dowager. Seeing that she was going to leave, Qin Wanru also stood up and left with her. Grandma didn't look well just now. It was obvious that Madame D had been making trouble here for a while. Grandma was old and in poor health. She couldn't stand Madame D's repeated pestering. She should focus on recuperating. "Mother, why is father so partial? I am his daughter, but he doesn't help me, but he helps that bastard." In Qin Yuru's room, Qin Yuru's face was full of anger. Her beautiful face was twisted with hatred. She grabbed the teacup in her hand and smashed it on the ground. Thinking back to the scene in the old madam's room, he could not suppress the hatred in his heart. Why could a bastard go to Bru and great elder princess's mansion, while she, the first miss of the Qin family, could only sneak into Duke Yong's mansion? Later, because of Di Fenglan and Qin Wanru, she had to come back. Why didn't Di Fenglan come back? Qin is better. The hatred in his heart was almost overwhelming. His eyes were already red. He casually picked up another teacup and smashed it fiercely. At this moment, she not only hated Qin Wanru, but also Di Fenglan. If it weren't for Di Fenglan's interference, she would not have been sent back in a hurry without any explanation. Yuru, your father just thinks that Qin Wanru is favored by Ru and great elder princess. It's good for him, so he punished you. He doesn't know who is his daughter. How could he treat a girl he picked up as a treasure? Madame D snorted. When she said those words, she knew she was going to ruin things. Mother, I don't want to accept it. Why can she be liked by Ru and great elder princess? I don't know what she said. When great elder princess likes her. Qin Yuru gnashed her teeth and said, she was jealous that Ru and great elder princess liked Qin Wanru. But she hated that Ru and great elder princess didn't like her. She was better than Qin Wanru. Ru and great elder princess must be blind. Of course, she didn't dare to say it. But even if she didn't dare to say it, the jealousy in her eyes had already explained everything. She had always been the noblest one in the mansion. How could she be worse than Qin Wanru? What did your grandmother say? Madame D calmed down at this time and asked with her eyes flashing. Although she didn't say clearly what it was, Qin Yuru immediately understood. Her resentment disappeared and her face darkened. Grandma said to wait a little longer. Wait? Wait until when? Do you still want to climb up the social ladder? Didn't you say that it didn't work out? She doesn't like Di Yen. Madame D patted the table with her hand, and her voice was tinged with a bit of cold anger. If it wasn't for her own family, she wouldn't be willing to let others choose her daughter, even if this mansion was her maiden family. She knew that Countess Yong wanted to choose a more suitable daughter-in-law with a higher status in private, but she always thought that her daughter was the best. At this time, Countess Yong didn't say yes for a long time, and she was already very upset. If her daughter really chose Duke Yong's mansion, Madame D thought that what happened today would never happen. Qin Huaiyong wouldn't treat her and her daughter like this. It seemed that she had to go back to Duke Yong's mansion again. Yuru, don't worry. I'll go there again and settle the marriage between you and Di Yen. Madame D said. She looked calm, but she was very anxious in her heart. It's up to you, Mother. Mother, I let this bastard show off today. If anything bad happens in Jiangzhou, people will definitely guess that it's me. What should I do then? Although Qin Yuru was also worried about her marriage, she felt very confident in her heart. After all, her cousin had repeatedly told her that he would marry her and had made a solemn pledge of love to her. The only thing left was her aunt's obstruction. However, her cousin also said that no matter how her aunt tried to obstruct him, he would marry her. He just asked her to wait for a while. At this time, she was thinking more about what Qin Wanru said today. Qin Wanru exposed the lie that she deliberately spread and even made many young madams look at her with strange expressions. Of course, she knew that they were all suspicious of her. She felt very sullen and angry. It seemed that the good situation was destroyed by Qin Wanru's words again. It won't happen. Jiangzhou is so far away. Who would notice you? Moreover, even if some news spread here, it would have already been spread by God knows what. One false news, another false news. At that time, everyone will just treat it as a joke. What's more, it may all be spread to Qin Wanru. When I left Jiangzhou, I specially asked someone to spread the news about Qin Wanru. Madame D sneered. Really, Mother? Qin Yuru looked surprised. Of course. You just wait and see. Not to mention that this news won't spread to the capital. Even if it does, it may not have anything to do with you. Madame D comforted her. Qin Yuru was satisfied. She nodded and said proudly, Mother, when Qi Tianyu comes, I'll go to see him. I don't believe that he won't listen to me. Qi Tianyu was the most important one among the rumors. As long as he didn't change his words, she would have something to explain. Even if there were some scattered rumors, it would not be a problem. Of course, she had never thought that Qi Tianyu was a problem. Yuru is the smartest, Madame D said with satisfaction. After the discussion, Madame D walked out of Qin Yuru's room. After a few steps, she said to Nanny Zhou beside her, "What do you think sister-in-law means?" She had less confidence in Countess Yong than Qin Yuru. "Madam, I think Countess Yong must have another candidate. Otherwise, she wouldn't keep pushing it." Nanny Zhou thought for a while and said, she had worked in Duke Yong's mansion for a few years, so she was familiar with Countess Yong. "Humph, she doesn't like Yuru." "If it's not Yuru," Madame D sneered with a gloomy face. She stopped and asked, "Haven't you found the seal?" "Madam, I haven't found it. I don't know if it was accidentally lost when I went to the capital to look for it." Nanny Zhou knew what she was asking and answered in a low voice. "I need it now." Madame D shook her hand and then slowly let go. "I always feel that this seal is not simple. Maybe we can use it." "I know what you mean, madam." Nanny Zhou's face was slightly pale. "But I don't know if it's true. No matter whether it's true or not, we have to try. Maybe it's true? If it's true, sister-in-law will be eager to marry our Yuru." Madame D sneered. If the Qin's mansion had not been weak, she would not have married herself to Di Yen. Di Yen did not seem to have a promising future. Anyway, she had to try. If she succeeded, Yuru's status would be greatly improved and she would be one of the few noble ladies in the capital. "Is old grandma's cup really missing?" Nanny Zhou asked cautiously and deliberately looked around. The maids and old maids behind her knew that she was Madame D's confidant. Since they were so close to each other, they must have something to say to her confidant, so they all tactfully retreated 10 steps away. She said it was left in Jingxin Temple. "I don't believe that the old lady would give such an important thing away." Madame D sneered. "Then what should we do?" Nanny Zhou didn't believe it either. But old grandma said so and they couldn't search old grandma's room. "Let's check here slowly. Send a letter to Madame Li of the magistrate and ask her to find a reason to confiscate Jingxin Monastery. I don't believe that we can't find it after searching the entire Jingxin Monastery. Promise Madame Li to help Qi Rongji find a good marriage." Madame D's face showed a trace of gloominess. Then she changed the topic. "Have the people sent by sister-in-law arrived?" "Yes. I have checked and they are all loyal to Madame. You can use them without worry." Was she going to wash Jingxin Monastery in blood for a glass cup? Nanny Zhou was also shocked. But looking at Madame D's face, she knew that she had made up her mind. So she didn't dare to say anything more. She just followed her intention and answered carefully. She knew that Madame D was asking about the maids and old maids sent by the merchant. "Pick a few and spread them out. Don't put all of them in my place in Yuru's." Madame D ordered. "When Qi Tianyu arrives, send someone to keep an eye on him to see if there's anything unusual." Madame D was not Qin Yuru. She didn't believe that Qi Tianyu would always listen to Qin Yuru. "Yes, I understand." "And those? Just let them quarrel for no reason." Madame D sneered and said coldly. Her mother taught her to cut flesh with a blunt knife. If she felt wronged, it would make the general less suspicious. In the end, it was still unknown whether Qi Rongji could give birth in October or not. If the first time didn't work, she would do it again. She didn't believe that she couldn't outlast Shui Rulin. "I will make it clear to these people. Let them pick the right time to stir up trouble and don't let others see it." Nanny Zhou understood tacitly and smiled extremely proudly. Chapter 156. Qi Tianyu didn't know that he had been schemed by many people before he arrived at Qin's mansion. He looked at the brocade clothes in front of him and hesitated. Should he cut off the relationship with Qin's mansion or not? But after thinking about it, he asked the servant to take the clothes and follow him to Qin's mansion. After entering Qin's mansion, he went to see Qin Huaiyong first. After they chatted for a while, Qin Huaiyong asked an old maid to take him to find Qi Rongji. Qi Rongji lived in a guest room, but because she was a member of the family, she lived in the guest room behind Shuihua Gate. Qi Tianyu followed the old maid into the room and saw many people. Someone had already reported to Qin Yuru. Qi Rongji was in a bad mood. When Qi Tianyu came in, he saw her maid, Chuani, kneeling on the ground and crying. He knew she was angry again, so he looked a little unhappy. "Go and serve tea to my brother." Chi Rongji kicked Chuan-yi and scolded, "You are just a blind girl." Chuan-yi hurriedly stood up with red eyes and hurried to the side. Chuan-shi hurriedly served tea. Chi Tianyu sat on a chair on the side and asked the servant to send the clothes to the table. Seeing these sets of gorgeous clothes, Chi Rongji was happy. She reached out to pinch them, looked at the lace and embroidery, and smiled with satisfaction. "Thank you, my brother." When Chi Tianyu took out another jewelry box from his bosom, Chi Rongji beamed with joy. She reached out to take it and saw that it was indeed a fashionable style. It was similar to the one she had seen Qin Yuru wearing these days, but it was even more beautiful. Her eyes lit up. "Rongji, you live in Qin's mansion now. You can't speak and act like you are at home. Even if the miss of Qin's mansion is not good, you can only bear it. Do you know what father and mother mean?" Chi Tianyu saw that Chi Rongji was in a good mood at this time, and there were their confidants in the room, so there was no taboo, so he spoke bluntly. "I know. They just want me to choose a good one." Chi Rongji blushed and hesitated. This was what her mother had been telling her before she came to the capital city. He asked her to choose a good marriage through Qin's mansion after she entered the capital. Therefore, you should be more careful in Qin's mansion. Don't have any conflicts with the Qin sisters. Now that you are living in their mansion, you can't make them unhappy with you. Otherwise, I can't help you outside. Chi Tianyu exhorted her once again. "Brother, did Qin Yuru tell you something?" Chi Rongji's smile disappeared when she heard Chi Tianyu's words. "Yuru didn't say anything to me. You should think about your current situation. Before you find a good marriage, remember not to fall out with the sisters of Qin's mansion. Wanru is still a child, so there is nothing to worry about, but Yuru, you still have to be more careful." Chi Tianyu warned her. "Big brother, I understand. Don't worry, I won't make trouble, let alone Qin Yuru." Chi Rongji said. She had thought this through. That was why she would rather sulk than find trouble with Qin Yuru these days. She could bear it. For her marriage, she could bear anything. It was the wet nurse who followed her to the capital who told her again and again that made her understand. "That's good. I can't stay here any longer, so I have to go back now. If you have any problems in the future, just ask the servant to send me a message." Chi Tianyu stood up and said. After thinking for a while, he added, "Or you can tell my second brother." "Chi Bayu? Brother, forget it. What can he do? The most he can do is to climb over the wall to play with Qin Wanru. But it's not a child now, and it's not Jiangzhou anymore. Even if he wants to find Qin Wanru, she may not care about him." Chi Rongji said sarcastically. She had never paid any attention to this half-brother of hers. In the past, she had only treated him as a servant and ordered him around in the manor. Seeing Chi Rongji like this, Chi Tianyu knew that she couldn't persuade him. He frowned and said nothing, then turned around and left. At this time, Chi Rongji's mind was full of clothes and jewelry. She didn't send him out of the yard, but directly took a set of clothes and went inside to change. Chi Tianyu came out of Chi Rongji's yard and turned a corner, and then he met Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru, who was dressed in a light peach-colored dress, stood at the end of the gravel path. She looked at him with reddened eyes and tightly held the handkerchief in her hand. She looked delicate and sad. Chi Tianyu stood far away and looked at Qin Yuru quietly, but he didn't approach her. "Brother Tianyu." Qin Yuru turned around and took the initiative to come to him. It seemed that she was surprised to see him, and her face was full of surprise. "First Miss Qin." Chi Tianyu saw her and saluted. "Brother Tianyu, why do you call me like this?" Qin Yuru was so sad that tears almost fell down. She stood in front of Chi Tianyu and didn't know what to say. She just felt sad and sad. "First Miss Qin, this is the best." Chi Tianyu shook his head and said gloomily. His eyes slightly fell on the ground 3 inches in front of him, and he looked polite and distant. In terms of appearance, Chi Tianyu was much better looking than Di Yan. He was tall and handsome, and they were childhood sweethearts. Naturally, Qin Yuru thought differently of him. Moreover, they had talked about marriage before. At that time, there was no news in the capital city, and Qin Yuru did want to marry him wholeheartedly. Later, because of Duke Yong's mansion, she changed her mind. She didn't feel sad after she retorted. In her heart, she had always thought that even if she and Di Yen were engaged, Qi Tianyu would always listen to her. However, when she saw that Qi Tianyu seemed to want to draw a clear line between them, she really panicked. At this time, her eyes really turned red. She took 2 steps forward and didn't care that they were still in the yard. She grabbed Qi Tianyu's clothes and tears fell down. "Brother Tianyu, I don't want to be like this. First Miss Qin now, it's good for both of us." Qi Tianyu was stunned for a moment. It seemed that he didn't expect Qin Yuru to be so out of control. But then he reached out to hold Qin Yuru's hand and pulled his clothes out of her hands and said calmly, "Brother Tianyu, I don't want to be like this. I don't want you to treat me like this. You will always be my brother Tianyu." Qin Yuru couldn't help crying. Her tears fell down and she leaned into Qi Tianyu's arms weakly. If she didn't hold Qi Tianyu, she was afraid that she would not be able to control herself and would fall to the ground. She only felt sad. How could Brother Tianyu treat her like this? How could he be so distant with her? It was impossible to pull her away in this way. Qi Tianyu looked around and took Qin Yuru to hide behind the rockery on the side. Although they were standing in a place not on the main road, it would not be good if they were seen by others. He took Qin Yuru to hide behind the rockery. Seeing that there was no one at the intersection, the servant walked to the intersection and stood behind a tree to help them keep watch. "Brother Tianyu, Brother Tianyu." Qin Yuru felt that she had never been so sad before. Since there was no one around, she hugged Qi Tianyu tightly and cried while muttering to herself. Qi Tianyu stood there and let her hug him. His eyes slowly fell on the face covered with tears and snot. There were traces of his love for her face in the past, but now it looked just like that. He even felt that her crying was so embarrassing that he even felt that it was ridiculous. A strong smile almost overflowed from his mouth. He tightly pursed his lips and suppressed the smile in his heart. "Well, don't cry. This is something that can't be helped." He sighed softly and slowly put one hand on Qin Yuru's shoulder. He gently patted her and comforted her. "Brother Tianyu, I don't want to marry anyone else. I only want to marry you. I want to marry you." Feeling Qi Tianyu's gentleness, Qin Yuru became more and more sad. For a moment, she really felt that Qi Tianyu was a good person. If these good things were not hers in the future, she really felt that she couldn't bear it. In the past, she never thought that Qi Tianyu would be estranged from her. When she saw Qi Tianyu just now, she felt inexplicably sad. "You want to marry me?" Qi Tianyu's eyes were inexplicably deep, but his face was still gentle. "Yes, I want to marry Brother Tianyu. Brother Tianyu, let's run away. Let's run far away to a place where no one can find us. No one will come looking for us in the future. We can be happy together forever." Qin Yuru held Qi Tianyu tightly and cried loudly. "Brother Tianyu." At this moment, even she herself felt that she was sincere to Qi Tianyu. She could give up everything and go with Qi Tianyu. She wanted nothing but to be with Qi Tianyu. "Let's go now?" Qi Tianyu answered gently. Really?" The next moment, Qin Yuru's sobs became low. Although her head was still buried in Qi Tianyu's arms, her body involuntarily tightened. She hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Tianyu, where are we going?" "I don't know anything. Will I be a burden to you?" "No, as long as it's you." Qi Tianyu smiled. His smile was a little strange, but Qin Yuru lowered her head and buried her face in Qi Tianyu's arms. She did not see it. Will my father come after us? And Brother Tianyu, are you really going to give up your Imperial examination? Will I be a burden to you? Qin Yuru raised her head carefully. "Then, what should we do?" Qi Tianyu asked. "I don't know. I only know that I want to be with Brother Tianyu. I don't want to be estranged from you. I don't want to leave you, but I don't want to be a burden to you. Brother Tianyu, what should we do? What should we do?" Qin Yuru became more and more sad. She only felt that she was the first lover since the beginning of time. Even she herself believed what she had said. The pain in her eyes was also real. "Then, let's talk about it later. After I finish high school, if you are not engaged, I will definitely come to ask for your hand again." Qi Tianyu said slowly in a gentle voice, just like the vow they made in Jiangzhou. Chapter 157. Of course I'm willing. But if you are already engaged, we are not meant to be. Qi Tianyu sighed. His eyes became softer and softer. His eyes were filled with pain and struggle, but they were full of affection and reluctance. Then I'll wait for Brother Tianyu to marry me. Qin Yuru smiled with tears in her eyes. She felt relieved when she saw the pain and struggle in Qi Tianyu's eyes. She promised, I'll be a lady from an aristocratic family with a good reputation in the future. I'll wait for Brother Tianyu to marry me on the day when you graduate. A good reputation was the most important thing. Since she wanted a good reputation, Qi Tianyu should not spread any bad news about her. Okay. Qi Tianyu nodded and his eyes became softer. He reached out and patted her shoulder. Call me Master Qi in front of others. I'll also call you Miss Qin. Okay, I'll listen to Brother Tianyu. Qin Yuru nodded and said, Then I'll go first. Qi Tianyu slowly pushed Qin Yuru away and said, Brother Tianyu, if you have time, you can come and see me more often. Qin Yuru said affectionately. But, Brother Tianyu, you go first. I want to watch you leave. Qin Yuru said coquettishly. You go first. Otherwise, I can't leave. Qi Tianyu said with some difficulty. I'll listen to Brother Tianyu. Qin Yuru shyly bit her lips and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. She turned around and walked out of the rockery. Then she waved the handkerchief in her hand at Qi Tianyu, who was behind the rockery, and turned around reluctantly. After she left, Qi Tianyu tidied up his robe and walked out calmly. He looked at Qin Yuru's back, who was almost out of sight, and his thin lips curled up. Seeing him coming out, the servant hurriedly followed behind him and walked out together. Soon, the two of them disappeared from sight. Qin Wanru was lying on an attic at the intersection and saw the scene clearly. A trace of deep thought and doubt flashed in her eyes. In her previous life, Qi Tianyu had always been Qin Yuru's capable helper and spared no effort in framing her. Qin Wanru had never understood why a smart person like Qi Tianyu would be so stubborn as to not realize that Qin Yuru was using him and had always treated him as a spare tire. Was Qin Yuru really so useful to him that he could ignore the fact that Qin Yuru was engaged and married? But now that he saw this scene, he felt as if there was something he hadn't thought of in his previous life. She frowned slightly and looked at the fake mountain where the two of them had a private meeting. She could not hear what the two of them were saying because they were too far away, but she could see their expressions and actions clearly. Qin Yuru was indeed good at acting. Perhaps even she herself believed that she was a woman who valued affection and righteousness. The emotional crying and complaining just now seemed very natural. However, Qi Tianyu made her feel very strange, especially the scene where he walked away calmly at the end. It seemed that something had scratched her fixed thoughts in the past. After such a sad separation with his sweetheart, he could still be so calm and even patted her sleeve in disgust behind the fake mountain. It made people feel that the affectionate and gentle man who was entangled with Qin Yuru just now was not him. But that man was him. Was there anything that she didn't know? Or did she forget something in her previous life? Miss, I think it was the first young master of the Qi family who abandoned First Miss. Yujia was also lying beside her. She couldn't help but ask in confusion, did I hear it wrong? Didn't people in Jiangzhou say that First Miss Qin wanted to climb the social ladder in the capital city, so she broke off the engagement of First Princess Qi and wanted to take the blame for Second Miss? Something seemed to flash in her mind. Qin Wanru stared at the fake mountain just now and thought of a past that she didn't care about. Those seemingly true and false past happened after she married into the deputy prime minister's mansion and accompanied Wen Shiqi in his last days. Wen Shiqi occasionally talked with her when he was sober. It was said that Qi Tianyu was originally the second class, but he became the third class in the palace examination. Later, Duke Yong strongly recommended him so that he could become the third class in the first class and become the third man of this year. Qi Tianyu had no friendship with Duke Yong's mansion. The only interaction he had was with Qin Yuru. She suddenly figured out some things that she couldn't figure out. As the abandoned party, Qi Tianyu would naturally make Qin Yuru feel guilty. If he was still deeply in love with her, he could increase the bargaining chip. Qin Yuru wanted Qi Tianyu to be a spare tire and Qi Tianyu wanted Qin Yuru to help him with his plans. These two people were really a match made in heaven. Miss, look, there is someone here. Yu Jie was still leaning on the window. At this time, she suddenly pointed to a person below and said. Qin Wanru looked in the direction of Yu Jie's hand and saw a sneaky old maid coming out from behind a tree near the rockery. She looked around and then sneaked out. This direction happened to be to the Yulan pavilion where Madame D lived. It was Madame D's people. However, after the old maid walked for a while, she turned back and looked back in confusion. This direction happened to be the direction of the attic. Miss, will she find us? Yu Jie lowered her voice and said, lowering her head involuntarily. Qin Wanru shook her head. There was a partition here, and the curtain of the partition was hung down, leaving only the bottom part slightly lifted. The two of them looked down from here, and it was impossible to find anything from the outside. No, miss, she is coming over. Yu Jie's face changed slightly and said. This old maid was actually very careful. She thought that from the special position of the attic, she might find the scene just now and wanted to see if there was anyone in the attic. Don't worry. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said, Qin Yu is down there. She had already guessed that Madame D would send someone to keep an eye on Qin Yuru, for fear that Qin Yuru and Qi Tianyu would fall out. That's good, that's good. Yu Jie's expression immediately relaxed and she admired Qin Wanru more. It turned out that second miss had already thought of this. As expected, the old maid didn't walk far and saw Qin Yu coming from afar. Qin Yu stopped when she saw the old maid and her face turned cold. Stop. Where are you from? How can you be so unruly? Qin Yu scolded coldly. As a senior in the mansion, she didn't know this old maid in front of her. Miss, I am new here. The old maid was smart. Seeing that Qin Yu stopped her, she knew that she must be a principal servant in the mansion. She immediately stopped and said with a smile, but she didn't mention where she was from. What are you doing here sneaking around? Qin Yu looked up and down at the old maid and deliberately said arrogantly. She hid far away before to prevent others from finding Miss in the attic. She thought that the old maid had left, but she didn't expect that she suspected that there was someone in the attic and turned back. I just don't know the way and got dizzy. The old maid smiled and said, Where are you going? Qin Yu continued to say with a cold face. I want to go to the kitchen. The old maid answered hurriedly. She didn't dare to say that she wanted to go to the attic to have a look. Although she said so, her eyes still wandered to the attic. It was closer here and she could see more clearly. Looking up, the curtain was down and there was nothing unusual. Go that way, just go over there. Qin Yu reached out and pointed in a direction unhappily. Thank you, I'll go right now. Seeing that there was nothing serious here, the old maid hurriedly nodded and bowed with a smile. After that, she went in the direction pointed by Qin Yu. Qin Yu followed her forward, which made the old maid so nervous that she almost looked back to see if Qin Yu followed her. However, she didn't dare to show her trace later. She could only go to the kitchen and pretended to ask for a few things. Qin Yu also followed her into the kitchen and asked the kitchen to bring the bird's nest porridge that she had stewed before. In the attic, Qin Wanru and Yu Jie took advantage of this gap to go downstairs and return to her Jifang pavilion. After sitting for a while, Qin Yu came in with a food basket. After entering the room, she took out the bird's nest porridge from the food basket and put it on the table in front of Qin Wanru. Then she stepped aside and reported, Miss, it's really the old maid from Madame D's yard. She said that it was sent here yesterday. At that time, Madame Shui and second miss were not there. She also said that last time you chose, and this time it was Madame D and first miss who chose. Since first miss was not there, all the candidates were chosen by Madame D alone. Qin Wanru drank a mouthful of porridge and asked after thinking for a while, Is it the same old maid from last time? No, it said that it's another old maid in the capital city. However, I saw that she didn't bring many people, and most of them were asked to stay by Madame D. Isn't Madame D the most picky? I don't know why she is so good-tempered this time. She didn't say much and actually took all the people. Qin Yu asked in surprise. Madame D's temper had always been a bit overbearing and unreasonable. In the past, when she was in a bad mood in Jiangzhou Prefecture, everyone knew that. However, it was unexpected that she became so good-tempered when she just came to the capital city. Qin Wanru smiled slightly but didn't say anything. She picked up the spoon and scooped up a mouthful of porridge. After taking a sip, her watery eyes narrowed. Madame D could use someone again. It should be a confidant selected by Duke Yong's mansion for her. Otherwise, it was impossible to ask her to keep an eye on Qin Yuru and Qi Tianyu as soon as they entered the mansion. Madame D's character was not so easy to trust people. Miss, when I was in the kitchen, I saw something else. When Qin Yu said this, she was a little angry. Thinking of what she accidentally saw in the kitchen, she felt a little suffocated. Originally, she didn't know such a thing. This time, she just watched the old maid go to the kitchen, but she saw such an accident. Thinking of it, she felt angry. Chapter 158. Miss, do you still remember where you got the bird's nest? Qin Yu asked. My mother's bird's nest was newly purchased by the mansion. It was said that it was for Aunt Shui to nourish her body. So Aunt Shui specially asked the servants to prepare an extra portion for me when they cooked the porridge. Qin Wanru said in surprise, not understanding why Qin Yu asked this. Yes, not only one, but 4 in total. Qin Yu said angrily. Thinking of the 4 bowls of porridge she saw in the kitchen just now, she suddenly became angry. It's obviously Madame Shui's healthy bird's nest porridge, and it's paid by Madame Dowager especially for Madame Shui to nourish her body. How can one person get one? Did you ask? Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered and she asked. I did. I asked whose it was. The supervisor of the kitchen said it was Madame D and First Mrs. Why did they all use Madame Shui's bird's nest? It was old grandma's private money. Even Madame Shui privately agreed to give it to you. She even said that she didn't like bird's nest but liked bird's nest porridge, so she could have more. The more Qin Yu thought about it, the angrier she became. When she thought of the old maid picking up the bird's nest, she almost exploded with anger. Qin Yu, were you very angry at that time? Qin Wanru blinked and suddenly smiled. Of course I was angry. Madame Shui deliberately saved it for you. Why did they take advantage of it? Qin Yu was not convinced and said. What if they didn't take advantage of it? Qin Wanru smiled, and her eyes were as clear as autumn water. What do you mean by not taking advantage of it? Qin Yu didn't understand. But Yu Jie understood. Could it be that Madame D and First Miss also bought it by themselves and then asked the kitchen to cook it together? This possibility made Qin Yu's eyes suddenly widen, and she couldn't believe it. Madame D would buy it by herself? Everything is possible. Why is it impossible for her? Seeing Qin Yu's look, Qin Wanru smiled and slightly raised the corner of her mouth. It was impossible in the past, but it doesn't mean it is impossible now. Qin Yu was shocked. She bit her lips and felt uneasy. Miss, I almost got angry just now and wanted to knock them over on purpose. Fortunately, you didn't, or someone deliberately provoked you. Qin Wanru smiled and reminded her. This reminded Qin Yu of what happened in the kitchen just now. She suddenly frowned and said hesitantly, Miss, I really think so. That old maid also took the bird's nest porridge. When she took it, she looked at me with a smile, as if she was very proud of it. Later, she took out a pouch and gave it to the old maid in the kitchen. Although she said that she did it secretly to avoid people, I did see it. Qin Wanru was just guessing at first, but now her eyes became serious. Who took the bird's nest porridge first? Qin Wanru's smile deepened. It was me. I saw that the old maid seemed to want to go up to the attic, so I stopped her. She said that she wanted to go to the kitchen and got lost. I thought that the bird's nest porridge might be ready, so I followed her to the kitchen, in case she slipped back halfway and found that Miss was upstairs. Before she went to the kitchen, she didn't know who I was. Qin Yu thought about what she had seen on the way and felt suspicious. At first, the old maid just peeped at her secretly and asked for some ordinary snacks. However, when she asked for the bird's nest porridge, the old maid smiled more complacently and asked for the bird's nest porridge too. Qin Yu didn't expect that the old maid would ask for bird's nest porridge. Just when she said so, she noticed that there were 4 identical bowls of bird's nest porridge. Later, she also saw the pouch that the old maid gave to the supervisor. So she thought that Madame D gave the supervisor of the kitchen some benefits, so the supervisor of the kitchen changed the original 2 bowls to 4 bowls. Thinking of this, Qin Yu almost couldn't bear it at that time. If she didn't worry that Qin Wanru was still in the attic, she might expose her Mrs. Identity if she made trouble here, she would not bear it at that time. Now thinking of it, it was so dangerous. It was obvious that the old maid deliberately pushed the boat with the current after knowing her identity. What a cunning old maid! After telling the whole thing to Qin Wanru, Qin Yu had understood it all at this time. She said anxiously, "Miss, what should we do now? When I left just now, the old maid didn't leave, but I met Qianghua on the way. Qianghua must go to take the bird's nest porridge for Madame Shui." "Where did you meet her?" The smile on Qin Wanru's face faded, and her eyes became cold. She put the spoon in the bowl and took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth gently. "She should be in the kitchen now." Qin Yu's face turned pale. "Should I go to find her now?" "It's too late," Qin Wanru said softly, and a trace of deepness flashed in her eyes. Madame D really didn't let people calm down. She also wanted to kill the baby in her mother's belly. After the first plan failed, she came up with a second plan. But it should not be the last plan to kill the baby. She was testing, what should we do? If Qianghua thinks like me and smashes the bird's nest porridge of Madame D and First Miss, Madame Shui will definitely be reprimanded. Qin Yu was so anxious that she almost beat them up. If Qianghua thought like her, she would definitely beat them up. No matter she irritated Qin Yu or the people around Madame Shui, at least Madame D and First Miss were innocent. If they really paid for the bird's nest porridge by themselves, Madame Shui would not be able to explain it. Even if Madame Shui was pregnant, she would also be punished this time. Madame Shui was pregnant. If she was really punished and something bad happened to her, it would be troublesome. "Miss, what should we do? What should we do?" Qin Yu was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. She could only keep looking at Qin Wanru, trying to find a solution from Qin Wanru. "Miss, I run faster. Let me go. Maybe Qiongji is calmer and hasn't done it yet." Yujia was also anxious. "It's too late," Qin Wanru said again, and then slowly analyzed. "The old maid arrived earlier than you, but she didn't leave after giving the purse. It is obvious that she is waiting for Qianghua. Moreover, this old maid is very cunning. She knows what Qianghua doesn't like to hear, so she is likely to provoke Qianghua on purpose. If others don't hear it and only see the final result, it must be Qianghua who is wrong. Then what should we do now?" Qin Yu was dumbfounded, and cold sweat appeared on her forehead. Everyone knew that Qianghua was the henchman of Madame Shui, so Qianghua's business was basically Madame Shui's business. "Go and find out where Madame D's bird's nest comes from. Why does she make bird's nest porridge like us? In the past, Madame D liked to drink it directly. Why does she make the same porridge as me and my mother this time?" Qin Wanru looked at the direction of Yulan Pavilion through the window and said calmly. Now the purchasing in the mansion was centralized. Even if Madame D wanted something personally, she had to pay the purchasing supervisor first and let the purchasing supervisor bring it into the mansion. In order to keep better evidence, Madame D would not take the bird's nest in the past, or it could be said that it was given by others. She must buy it from a legal place. But there was also a shortcoming. When Madame D went to Duke Yong's mansion, she brought back some gifts. It was said that there was bird's nest among them. At that time, when Madame D showed the gifts from Duke Yong's mansion to Madame Dowager, she was quite arrogant. At that time, Qin Yuru glanced at it. There were many bird's nests, and they were all in Madame D's hands. Madame D and Qin Yuru had the same hobbies. They both liked bird's nest porridge, and all the seniors in the mansion knew it. Then there was one last point left. Why were the 4 bowls placed in the same way? How could others recognize which one belonged to Madame D and her daughter, and which one belonged to her mother and herself? "I'm going to find the purchasing supervisor." After listening to Qin Wanru's analysis, Qin Yu said and turned to run out. "To find the purchasing supervisor from the outer court," Qin Wanru added. Qin Yu still wanted to ask something, but it was too late. In addition, she trusted Qin Wanru more and more, so she didn't ask why it was the purchasing supervisor from the outer court. She ran out directly. I'm going to the kitchen to see what's going on there. Maybe Qianghua hasn't been irritated. Yu Jie thought it was better for her to go to the kitchen. No matter what was going on there, Miss still knew nothing. She should act faster. After the two finished distributing, they left in a hurry. Qin Wanru picked up the spoon, continued to drink a spoonful, and then put it down, with a gloomy look in her eyes. Madame D acted very fast, and it seemed that she was going to do it slowly. Of course, it would be better if something happened intermittently. It seemed that Duke Yong's mansion not only sent people here, but also gave her advice. Qin Yu came back quickly. The purchasing was divided into the inner court and the outer court. The purchasing of the inner court was managed by Shui Ruolin, but the purchasing of the outer court was managed by Qin Huaiyong himself. Qin Yu went directly to the purchasing supervisor from the outer court. Coincidentally, he was also there. Hearing that she was asking about the bird's nest, he picked up the account book and checked it. Then he told Qin Yu that there was indeed such a thing. It was Madame D's idea. She said that she and First Miss also wanted to eat bird's nest, so she asked him to bring some in when he went out to buy. This kind of thing was not considered a big deal in any mansion. The masters all had their own share, but some masters had to fork out their own money if they wanted to eat or use something else. It was not a public account, so they just had to pay for it themselves. At that time, Qin Yu deliberately asked when Madame D made such a request. The day mentioned by the purchasing supervisor was the night when Shui Ruolin found that she was pregnant and old grandma wanted to buy bird's nest for her with her private money. On the same night, not only Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru had the bird's nest porridge, but also Madame D and Qin Yuru had it. One after the other, it was on the same day. Hearing this, Qin Wanru understood it all. It was not a temporary idea. It was made when she found that her mother was pregnant. There was a trace of fierceness in her eyes. Chapter 159. When Qin Wanru arrived at the kitchen, the two people who were fighting had been pulled apart. It was Yu Jie who was pulling Qianghua, and the supervisor of the kitchen was pulling an old maid on the other side. Both of them had messy hair and scratches on their faces, and both of them looked aggressive. Shui Ruolin hadn't come yet, but Madame D had already arrived and was interrogating the two people. The old maid was really the old maid from before. A lot of servants surrounded the kitchen door, and those behind were standing on tiptoes to look inside. Qin Wanru came behind them with Qin Yu without alerting others. She just listened quietly. Madame D's voice was not low, and it was obvious that she was very angry. They stood there quietly, and the people in front of them all focused on the kitchen, so no one noticed them. Qianghua, why did you beat people? How could you bully a newcomer just because you are a senior in the mansion? Madame D asked harshly, which meant that she had asked clearly just now. Madame D, it's clear that she provoked me on purpose and spoke ill of my master. I was so angry that I fought with them and... Qianghua's eyes fell on several bowls of bird's nest porridge which were exactly the same on the stove. When she was about to mention this matter in a very angry tone, her wrist was pinched by Yu Jie fiercely. She uttered, ouch, due to the pain, but she couldn't finish her words. Qianghua, did you tell the truth? She is a newcomer, and who gave her the courage to provoke you, a senior in the mansion? She didn't even know who you are, but she provoked you. Is she stupid? Madame D sneered. Madam, you have to uphold justice for me. I came to the kitchen to get the bird's nest porridge you ordered, but this servant girl, I don't know who she is. She said that your bird's nest porridge was taken from her master and that it belongs to her master. I didn't accept it, so I argued with her. I didn't expect that she would hit me. Please uphold justice for me, madam. As a newbie, I don't know what's going on. I really don't understand why the dignified madam of the general needs to share some food from others. The old maid pushed away the supervisor in the kitchen and cried loudly. She cried while wiping her tears and shouted that she was wronged. She was not the only one who was wronged, but also Madame D's. Cheonghua was so angry that she trembled all over. How could there be such a person in the world who turned black into white? She provoked Madame D first, took out her purse and gave it to a supervisor in the kitchen. She even pointed at Madame D secretly and was afraid that Cheonghua would see it. However, Cheonghua did see it. She was obviously asking the supervisor in the kitchen to pour more bird's nest porridge to Madame D. Cheonghua also saw 3 identical bowls. Madame didn't want to eat the bird's nest given by Madame Dowager alone, so she made porridge for herself and second Mississippi. Even if we don't get along well, it's not something that you, a servant girl, can meddle in and take advantage of. But now you dare to frame my servant girl, and you keep saying that she provoked you and scolded your master. I asked you to say it out, but you have nothing to say. It's obvious that you have a guilty conscience. If you take it out again, if you don't show me the evidence, I will punish you according to the family rules. The smile on Madame D's face faded slowly, and she looked fair and strict. She even expressed that although there was a gap between her and Shui Rulin, they were a family after all. However, the intention of this family was to punish Cheonghua fairly. Cheonghua was angry and anxious. She wanted to rush to Cheonghua, but Yu Jie held her tightly. She couldn't move for a while. She looked around and found that they were all servants and stewards in the kitchen. But there was no one else around them at that time, so no one could testify for her. But Cheonghua looked at Madame D with hatred. She obviously knew that she had fallen into the trap of Madame D's servant girl. Cheonghua clearly knew that she was the most personal servant girl of Madame, and she married with Madame and came back later. Her relationship with Madame was different from that of a normal master and servant girl. If something really happened to her, Madame would definitely be sad. Madame was pregnant now. If she got hurt, it would be troublesome. Since that's the case, come on, take Cheonghua away and flog her 20 times. Madame D said lightly. Yes. Immediately 2 rough old maids came over and dragged Cheonghua out. After being flogged 20 times, she would be skinned even if she didn't die. At least she couldn't serve Shui Rulin for a period of time. Now Shui Rulin's baby was less than 3 months old, and it was the most critical period. If she was not careful, she might have an abortion. How could Shui Rulin not feel distressed when the most useful servant girl of Shui Rulin was beaten? But the facts were there. It was useless for Shui Rulin to blame Madame D. Everything was according to the rules, and Cheonghua couldn't distinguish it. Wait! Qin Wanru calculated the time and knew that it was almost time to come, so she said, "Our second miss is coming." Qin Yu shouted loudly. The crowd immediately separated to 2 sides, and Qin Wanru walked in slowly with Qin Yu. The 2 rough old maids wanted to pretend that they didn't hear it and continued to pull Cheonghua. But Yu Jie came forward and pushed them out fiercely. The 2 old maids were not convinced and wanted to go forward, but Qin Wanru said coldly, "If you don't listen to your master, slap your mouth." With Qin Wanru's order, Yu Jie didn't show any mercy. She came over and pushed the 2 old maids hard. The 2 old maids were pushed back a few steps before they could stand firm. Seeing Qin Wanru's cold eyes fall on them, they were immediately shocked and didn't dare to move. "Wanru, you are so young, but you are so imposing." Madame D didn't expect that Qin Wanru would intervene at this time, and her face became more gloomy. In fact, she had calculated the time. Shui Rulin was pregnant and wouldn't come soon. Old grandma was not in good health, so she couldn't come too early. Moreover, the things in the backyard were usually reported to Shui Rulin, not necessarily to old grandma. As for Qin Huaiyong, even if he came, he couldn't say anything because she followed the rules. She wanted to let Shui Ruolin suffer in silence, so that she couldn't say anything and might have a miscarriage out of anger. That would be the best. Madame D didn't expect that Qin Wanru would come so soon. This thing shouldn't be reported to Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was just a little girl and didn't care about the things in the mansion. But the person she didn't expect the most suddenly came out and jumped out when she was about to succeed. How could Madame D not be angry? But now she didn't dare to look down on Qin Wanru. After mocking her, she said coldly, Qianghua deliberately fought with others and accused others indiscriminately. Now she can't give a reason. If all the servants in the mansion are like this, will there still be rules in the mansion in the future? Don't tell me you can't punish such a servant? She didn't worry about what Qianghua would say. Whether it was about the bird's nest porridge or the old maid, she was in the right. Even if Qin Huaiyong wanted to help Shui Ruolin, he couldn't, let alone Qin Wanru. She was just a cheap girl who overestimated herself. Did she really think that she could control everything? Second miss, she was the one who deliberately stirred up trouble. I'm really wronged. I beg second miss to redress my grievances. The old maid was an onlooker and didn't mind making trouble. At this time, seeing Madame D's face, she wanted to flatter Madame D. She cried and rushed to Qin Wanru, as if she really wanted Qin Wanru to help her. Madame D was very satisfied and showed a trace of pride on her face. A little girl dared to fight with an old fox. She would wait to see a good show. Chapter 160. Yu Jie, wake her up. Qin Wanru sneered. Before everyone understood what Qin Wanru meant, Yu Jie had come over and slapped the old maid twice. Then she kicked the old maid fiercely on her chest and kicked the old maid to the ground. Everyone was shocked. The people around Second Miss were so cruel. In the past, this servant girl named Yu Jie was also kind and smiled when she met people. Many onlooking servant girls and old maids could not help but step back and did not dare to get close to Yu Jie for fear of accidentally provoking her. In the past, they only thought that Second Miss was the daughter of Madame Shui and Madame Shui was the madam of the head of the family, so they would naturally flatter her. Moreover, now Madame Shui was pregnant. Being respectful to Second Miss was being respectful to Madame Shui. Everyone in the mansion was not stupid and respected her. Now they found that although Second Miss was so young, she had a strong momentum. It seemed that she was more powerful than the two madams in the mansion. She stood there and faced Madame D, but she was not weak. Instead, she seemed to be more powerful. No servant here dared to look down on Qin Wanru anymore. You are rebellious, rebellious. Qin Wanru, you are really rebellious. Madame D trembled with anger. Nanny Zhou standing behind her was also scared and her face turned pale. No one expected that Qin Wanru would come up and slap her. She did not give anyone a chance to explain at all, or even if she explained, she did not intend to listen to others' explanation. Madam, are you very angry? Qin Wanru turned to look at Madame D and suddenly smiled sweetly. Such a smile was a little childish and sweet, but at this time, it made the servants present step back involuntarily. They inexplicably felt a little danger from Second Miss Smile. The scene was very quiet, absolutely silent. Qin Huaiyong came with Shui Ruolin. The reason why he came late was that he happened to be at Shui Ruolin's place. Shui Ruolin was pregnant and walked slowly. Hearing that Qianghua had an accident, Shui Ruolin couldn't wait to come over immediately. However, because Qin Huaiyong was there, he was afraid that something bad would happen to her, so he took her very slowly. Therefore, she arrived at this moment. When Qin Huaiyong came in and saw the scene in front of him, he frowned and wanted to come in, but his hand was held by Shui Ruolin. Looking at Qin Wanru standing in the crowd, Shui Ruolin intuitively felt that she should not let Qin Huaiyong go at this time, so she simply held Qin Huaiyong's hand and stood outside the crowd. At this time, everyone's attention was focused on the inside, so they did not notice Qin Huaiyong and Shui Ruolin, who came with only a servant girl and a manservant. How dare you? Looking at the people around, Madame D gritted her teeth and scolded, no matter how useless this old maid is, she is still my woman. As soon as she said this, everyone's eyes fell on Madame D and the old maid immediately. This old maid was new, and the people in the kitchen had not seen her before. Moreover, thinking that the old maid Teeth had just arrived, she should be one of the new batch. Shouldn't the new batch be careful? Why did this old maid look like a wily old fox? There were many old maids in the kitchen, and many of them were smart. At this time, when they looked at this old maid, they all felt very suspicious, and it did not seem that she had just come in. Qin Huaiyong reached out to hold Shui Ruolin's hand. Shui Ruolin's hand was very cold. Just now, she was anxious and sweating, but she could not walk fast. At this time, seeing that Qin Wanru was here, she felt relieved in her heart. After the sweat on her body subsided, she felt very cold. If it were not for Qin Wanru, Qianghua might have been in danger now. The relationship between her and Qianghua was not ordinary master and servant. If something really happened to Qianghua, Shui Ruolin was not sure whether she would really be fine. Thinking about this, her hands and feet became colder and colder. Madame D wanted to deal with her and the child in her belly, and Qianghua was just a tool for her to deal with her. Qin Huaiyong gently pinched Shui Ruolin's hand, held her cold hand in his palm, and whispered softly, "It's okay, it will be okay." There was a trace of thoughtfulness in his eyes. Originally, he thought that Qianghua was just an ordinary servant girl. Even if she was a personal principal servant girl, she was just a servant. Now he found the position of this servant girl in Shui Ruolin's heart. This servant girl named Qianghua was special to Shui Ruolin. It seemed that he had to think carefully. Shui Ruolin bit her lips with a pale face, did not say anything, but nodded. Qin Huaiyong signaled to the servant who followed him, and the servant said loudly, "General and Madame Shui are here." Hearing that there were masters coming, the crowd hurriedly retreated to the side. This time, it was Qin Huaiyong who slowly walked in, holding Shui Ruolin's hand. Hearing the sound outside, Madame D knew that today's matter was going to be terrible, but she did not panic. As long as this matter could be made big and made Shui Ruolin lose her manners, it would be okay. Now Qin Wanru, the bitch, pestered endlessly for so long, and later found that it was Shui Ruolin's fault. Then not only the servant girl Qianghua would be punished, but also Qin Wanru. She wanted to see what would happen when the people around Shui Ruolin got into trouble one by one. Would she collapse on the spot? If so, it was really a surprise. Looking down at their tightly held hands, Madame D's eyes flashed a trace of jealousy and hatred, but she also knew that it was not the time to be jealous. Seeing Qin Huaiyong coming, she hurriedly bowed to him, and then said, "General, you come at the right time. Listen to what Wanru said to me just now. She actually sided with my sister's people, as if my sister deliberately sent people to provoke me." Qin Wanru also bowed, but did not immediately answer. "What's the matter?" Qin Huaiyong glanced at the people present and asked in a low voice. He was a general and always had a strong momentum. Wherever his eyes fell, no one dared to raise their heads. Even the old maid who had been lying on the ground in pain and seemed unable to get up dared not to make trouble at this time. She just covered her chest and pretended to be extremely weak. However, Qin Huaiyong was a general who had been in and out of the battlefield, and he clearly saw this kind of pretended weakness. His eyes fell on the old maid's face as sharp as a blade. Not to mention the cause of this matter, this old maid was not a good person. "General, it was my sister's servant girl who spoke rudely and fought with this old maid. The kitchen was in a mess, and the servants came to me, so I came to have a look. Thinking that my sister is pregnant now, I will deal with this kind of thing for her. Unexpectedly, this servant girl is not a good person. She said that this old maid provoked her and scolded her, but she couldn't say what she scolded. It is obvious that she deliberately framed others. General, do you think such a person should be punished?" Madame D had been prepared for this. She blurted out these words with anger and annoyance on her face, as if she was really so angry because Qianghua was a bad servant. After saying this, she also said bitterly, "My sister is not in good health now. Many things may need to be done by people around her. If this servant girl is not good, she may implicate my sister in the future. My sister can't afford it now. For my sister's sake, I'd better send this servant girl away as soon as possible and find some other good ones." Madame D's words became more and more sincere, as if she really considered for Shui Ruolin wholeheartedly. Moreover, her words hit the part that Qianghua couldn't say just now, so she couldn't refute a word. For a moment, her face turned red, and she clenched her fists tightly in anger. Chapter 161. Madame D's words were watertight, and she was generous and decent. No matter from which aspect, she couldn't find any fault. However, when she was so reasonable, Qin Wanru still went against her. General, look at Wanru. She doesn't know the meaning of filial piety now, and she is so willful. This is the capital city, not Jiangzhou in the past. The capital city is full of misses from aristocratic families. Not to mention us, even misses from aristocratic families in the capital city dare not be so willful. Seeing Qin Wanru stood out as expected, Madame D looked sad. She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief and showed a sad look. When I took care of Wanru, she was just a naive child. It meant that Qin Wanru was now under Shui Rulan's name and was misled by Shui Rulan. How could she be so willful in such a short time? Of course, Qin Huaiyong would not allow Qin Wanru to be so willful. It was better to punish Qin Wanru heavily. At that time, Shui Rulan would be more sad and sad. It was certainly the best to add fire to the original foundation. Qin Huaiyong frowned and looked at Qin Wanru. He was slightly unhappy. Wanru, do you know what you are talking about? Father, it was really this old maid who deliberately caused trouble. Qin Wanru looked at Qin Huaiyong calmly and said, What do you mean? Qin Huaiyong asked in a low voice. Madame D's eyes showed a complacent look. She could see that Qin Huaiyong was a little angry. That was the best. She was afraid that Qin Huaiyong would not be angry. She did not believe that Qin Wanru could explain the matter of Qianghua. As long as this matter could not be explained, Qin Wanru would be punished no matter what she said. She was just a little girl who knew nothing and dared to get involved in this mess. But it was a surprise. She had thought that Qianghua was not enough and it would be better to make Shui Rulan suffer. Father, I have evidence that this old maid has bad intentions. Qin Wanru said. What evidence? Qin Huaiyong asked. Madame D's heart skipped a beat and she subconsciously glanced at Nanny Zhou beside her. When she saw that Nanny Zhou was calm and collected, she breathed a sigh of relief. Madame D was really shocked by this little girl and thought that she really had evidence. What evidence could there be? There was no material evidence. The old maid was so careful, so there must be no witness. Thinking of this, a faint smile appeared on her face, and her eyes seemed to look at Qin Wanru with kindness, as if Qin Wanru was being rude and making trouble. This was very similar to her previous persona. In front of Qin Huaiyong, she treated Qin Wanru very well, and sometimes even better than Qin Yuru. She was a real motherly person. Qin Yu stood out from behind Qin Wanru. After saluting to Qin Huaiyong, she pointed at the old maid and said, General, I have seen this old maid before. She came to the kitchen earlier than me and walked around the bird's nest porridge. I heard from Miss that the bird's nest porridge belonged to Madame Shui, but Madame Shui was reluctant to eat it alone, so she gave half of it to my Mississippi. But now there are so many, Qin Yu said as she pulled Yujie and Qianghua out of the way. In front of them were 4 small stoves, and there were 3 identical bowls of bird's nest porridge on them. From the outside, they looked exactly the same. After being stunned for a moment, Qin Huaiyong squinted his eyes and turned to Madame D. Madame D's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly calmed down, for fear that Qin Huaiyong could see something from her face. She said, General, I also asked the kitchen to stew bird's nest porridge for me and Yuru, and I asked the purchasing staff in the mansion to buy it. If you don't believe me, you can ask someone to ask. She specially asked the purchasing staff to buy bird's nest porridge, just in case she was involved in this matter. The cause of this matter was actually the bird's nest porridge. As expected, after hearing this, Qianghua suddenly opened her eyes wide and looked at Madame D in astonishment. Needless to say, she must have thought so just now. General, is it okay for our madam to stew some bird's nest porridge herself? Nanny Zhou understood and immediately helped Qin Huaiyong. She was the wife of a general. What could happen if she stewed bird's nest in her own house? Her question seemed to be suppressed by Shui Rulan, and Madame D was not allowed to stew bird's nest porridge. Qin Huaiyong frowned more tightly, and his face was a little pale. "Madam, when you returned to Duke Yong's mansion, I heard from my grandmother that Duke Yong's mansion returned a lot of bird's nest as a gift. Why did you still go out to buy bird's nest? Is it better than the one sent by Duke Yong's mansion?" Qin Wanru asked with bright eyes. This question was unexpected by Madame D, and it was difficult to answer. If she said it was better, why did she go out to buy bird's nest? If she said it was not good, it would be a disgrace to Duke Yong's mansion. Of course it is because the bird's nest in Duke Yong's mansion is very good. Madame has nothing to eat at the moment, so she wants to send some to old grandma and Madame Shui later. Seeing that the situation was not good, Nanny Zhou immediately helped Madame D and explained stiffly. Was Madame D such a person? Qin Huayong's eyes flickered, but he did not say anything. Madame is really kind to people. I thank you on behalf of my grandmother and mother. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, bowed sideways, and then turned to look at the old maid. Nanny Zhou, can you explain why this old maid stayed in the kitchen and did not leave until Qin Yu came back from the kitchen and Qianghua came in? During such a long time, a new old maid did not do anything but did not leave. What was she doing? When Qin Yu came back, I was late for a while and then went to the kitchen. During this period, the time from the kitchen to our yard and back was more than the time. Yu Jie approved. Tell me what happened? Qin Huayong said coldly. It was unknown whether he was asking the old maid or Nanny Zhou. Nanny Zhou opened her mouth with a little panic. She did not expect that there was such a thing. For a moment, she did not know where to start. Her eyes also fell on the old maid, and she secretly winked at her. The old maid immediately understood. She struggled to sit up with her hands on her chest and said, General, I want to see if the bird's nest is ready. Madam likes to eat the stewed bird's nest. I wanted to leave, but the bird's nest is not ready, so I waited for a while. Then Madame Shui's servant girl came. After saying that, the old maid deliberately coughed a few times in a low and painful voice. She looked very dispirited. It turns out to be because of this. No wonder she has been gone for so long. Nanny Zhou seemed to be suddenly enlightened. She turned to Qin Huayong and said respectfully, General, this old maid is new. I was afraid that she didn't understand, so I specially told her that Madam likes to eat bird's nest porridge, which is very rotten, and asked her not to rush to take it. I just said it casually, but I didn't expect that this old maid was so stubborn and waited here. Looking at the way Nanny Zhou and the old maid echoed each other, and then looking at the trace of complacency in Madame D's eyes, Qin Wanru showed a trace of disgust in her eyes. This old maid was really wily. She could even think of such a reasonable reason at this time. Then why did she secretly put a purse into the kitchen supervisor's purse in front of me? Qin Yu said loudly, pointing at an old maid hiding in the crowd. At that time, I also wondered why there were 2 more bowls of bird's nest porridge, so she secretly put a purse into the supervisor's purse and kept looking at me secretly. It seemed that she put the purse into the supervisor's purse for this reason. Yes, that's it. I also saw her put the purse into the supervisor's purse in front of me. It seemed that she wanted to hide it from me, but in fact, I happened to see it. This time it was the supervisor who put the purse into the supervisor's purse. Qianghua also came to her senses at this time. She pointed at another supervisor hiding in the crowd and said, At that time, this old maid was also peeping at me, and I happened to see whether Madam's bird's nest porridge was ready. The 2 old stewards who were accused wanted to hide in the crowd, but the crowd had already dispersed to both sides, exposing the 2 of them. What's the matter? Qin Huayong's eyes fell on the 2 old maids coldly. The 2 old maids looked at each other and knelt down with a plop sound. General, she just asked us to take good care of Madam's bird's nest porridge in the future and asked us to do our best. That purse was also given by Madam. Yes, that's it. She didn't say anything else. The 2 old maids didn't dare to hide and said hurriedly. She gave the purse in front of Qin Yu or Qianghua twice. What a coincidence! It seems that she was afraid that they couldn't see it. The 2 servant girls didn't know that Madam asked others to buy bird's nest porridge. What the old maid did was easy to make people suspicious. Moreover, she just wanted the kitchen to cook a better bird's nest porridge, but she gave 2 purses. Madam is really rich. Qin Wanru sighed. This is what I mean. I am afraid that the kitchen would neglect Madam. Now the kitchen should focus on Madame Shui's health. Nanny Zhou lowered her head and said, it meant that the people in the kitchen only cared about Shui Ruolin and ignored Madame D's affairs. As the legal wife, she had to pay for the people in the kitchen to be more attentive if she wanted to eat the food she liked. These words made Qin Huaiyong's eyes turn cold. Although he didn't like Madame D, he didn't intend to let the kitchen treat her so harshly. If these words were spread out, not only Madame D would lose face, but also Duke Yong's mansion would not let this matter go. Cousin, it seems that there is another mystery in this matter. Then let's arrest them together and I will ask them carefully. Shui Ruolin had seen through it at this time and anger flashed in her eyes. Is my sister's health really okay? It will not be good if she is angry later. Moreover, one of them is my sister's servant. Madame D looked concerned, but when her eyes fell on Shui Ruolin's face, she looked a little provocative. Of course, she meant that Shui Ruolin should avoid arousing suspicion. When Madame was about to beat Qianghua, you didn't say so. This old maid is Madame's servant, right? Qin Wanru didn't intend to let her be so complacent. If she wanted to avoid arousing suspicion, Madame D should also avoid arousing suspicion. Qin Wanru raised the corner of her mouth and continued with a smile. Moreover, there is one more thing that I want to tell Madame to consider in detail. Chapter 162. What's the matter? Tell me. Madame D asked. I just want to ask why these bowls of bird's nest porridge are the same? What if I make a mistake and hurt my little brother in my mother's belly? Qin Wanru said unhurriedly. Madam, why did you make the same bowl of bird's nest porridge as my mother? I remember that you didn't like bird's nest porridge before. I remember that once the kitchen mistook your meaning and made the original bird's nest porridge into bird's nest porridge. Madam even beat the kitchen supervisor and threw the bird's nest porridge directly on the supervisor. Do you remember this, Madam? It happened in Jiangzhou because Madame D threw the hot bird's nest porridge on the supervisor of the kitchen and made a big deal of it. The reason why it was so big was that the supervisor was not the son of the servants in the mansion. He came to help the servants do a good job and temporarily worked as a supervisor for a period of time. Later, Madame D also gave some money to the supervisor, but the supervisor's family was not satisfied, so it became a big fuss. Fortunately, Qin Huaiyong had great power in Jiangzhou and it didn't take long to suppress it. But everyone in the mansion knew it. After saying this, Qin Huaiyong's face suddenly changed. If it was true, Madame D's matter today was full of doubts. Thinking of Madame D's attitude in the past and thinking that it seemed to be caused by the bird's nest porridge, Qin Huaiyong's face became more and more gloomy. Did Madame D want to deal with the baby in Shui Ruolin's belly? Otherwise, why did she, who didn't like bird's nest porridge, make a fuss? First, she specially bought the bird's nest and didn't use the bird's nest sent by Duke Yong's mansion. Then, the new old maid met Qingyu and Qianghua, and Qingyu made a fuss with Qianghua. Did it represent Madame D's purpose? If it was true, all the previous specious explanations could be explained. Everything was prepared early and they were just waiting for her to ask. Madame D really had bad intentions. Shui Ruolin felt relieved. Although she didn't say anything, she was afraid that Qin Wanru couldn't deal with Madame D. Nanny Zhou's explanation not only made Madame D sound innocent, but also made her feel aggrieved. This matter involved her people, so it was more inconvenient for her to speak at this time. She could only pin her hope on Qin Wanru. When Madame D heard Qin Wanru's words, she immediately knew that something was wrong. Qin Huaiyong was becoming more and more distrustful of her. His words were full of doubts. Looking up at Qin Huaiyong's extremely ugly face, she could no longer pretend to be calm and immediately said to Qin Wanru, Wanru, what do you mean by this? Don't tell me I didn't like it before, but now I like it, okay? Of course Madame can choose to drink if she pleases, but don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? Even Madame came faster than others. Chapter 163. Brother-in-law, what do you mean? Qin Huaiyong's face darkened. I don't mean anything. I just feel that there are so many women who can give birth to children. Why do you marry a widow who has been raised in your family? If this matter is known by others, The censorate will not let you go. Duke Yong snorted and threatened him coldly. The witness is still here. Brother-in-law, have you forgotten? Qin Huaiyong said with an unkind face. So what? Don't you want the help of Marquis's mansion of Fengyang? Duke Yong said slowly, and his face became serious. When I went to Marquis's mansion of Fengyang, I talked about you and said that I would come down as soon as possible. But, if you are reported by the censorate because of Madame Shui, it will be difficult. You won't take out the witness and say something specious, will you? He meant that if Qin Huaiyong really took out some evidence to prove that Shui Rulin had no choice but to marry into Qin's mansion and was framed by Madame D, and then she did it to take care of Qin Wanru who was used by Madame D, it would mean that Madame D was not only unvirtuous but also vicious. Duke Yong would never allow Qin Huaiyong to say so. Otherwise, not only Duke Yong's mansion's reputation would be ruined, but also all the women of Madame D's family would be affected. In other words, if Qin Huaiyong really said these things in public, Duke Yong's mansion would not only not admit it, but also fall out with Qin Huaiyong. The foundation of Duke Yong's mansion was incomparable to that of Qin's mansion. Qin Huaiyong's face was very ugly, but he suppressed his anger and looked at Duke Yong coldly. Brother-in-law, thank you for your concern. But I don't need you to worry about the affairs of my mansion. Seeing Qin Huaiyong's look, Duke Yong knew that he was angry in his heart, but he was just suppressing it. Duke Yong knew that he should stop while he was ahead, so he stopped asking about this matter and looked a little relaxed. Now I don't know how you are going to deal with this matter. My sister was inexplicably hurt. Even if I don't say anything, you have to say something, right? Brother-in-law, how do you want to say something? In fact, it's very simple. My sister married you first, so she is the first madam. Even if Madame Shui marries you now, she can only be the second madam. Even if she is a secondary wife, she can't be the first madam. Now my sister is sick, so she has to take care of her, right? Duke Yong said. She's pregnant now, it's really inconvenient. Qin Huaiyong immediately refused. If Shui Rulin really went to Madame D's place, the baby in her belly would definitely be lost. The baby in her belly might be his only child, so he would not agree no matter what. Then your little daughter it is. My sister took care of her for a period of time before, so it's reasonable for her to take care of her now, isn't it? Duke Yong settled for the second best. Qin Huaiyong was silent for a while. After a while, he nodded. Compared with Shui Rulin, Qin Wanru was indeed more suitable. Moreover, it seemed that Duke Yong's mansion would not give up until they sent one over. That's good. I'll go to see my sister now and ask her to be careful in the future. It's not good to be so reckless. This time she accidentally hurt herself, but next time she may accidentally hurt someone else. Duke Yong showed a smile on his face, and his attitude became amiable. He even said that Madame D accidentally fell down. Next time, she really needs to be careful. She won't be fine every time. Qin Huaiyong forced a smile on his face, but his words had a different meaning. The smile on Duke Yong's face immediately faded, but then he smiled again. He stood up and reached out to pat Qin Huaiyong's shoulder. Good. In the future, Uncle Lang and I will join hands and definitely help you gain a firm foothold in the Imperial court as soon as possible. After saying that, he walked out with a smile. After a few steps, he looked at Qin Huaiyong, who was still sitting in the chair behind him, and said in surprise, "Why don't you go to see my sister together? Such a thing has happened. If you don't go to see her, it will be misunderstood. The censorate in the capital city is most likely to find this kind of news. When it comes to the report, it will be bad." Knowing that he was threatening him, Qin Huaiyong snorted coldly, stood up, walked to the table and said, "Brother-in-law, you go to see her first. I'll go there later. I won't disturb you too. I have an invitation card sent by Ru and Great Elder Princess, and I'm thinking whether I should go or not." From Ru and Great Elder Princess Mansion? Duke Yong was stunned, and then his complacent face became a little ugly. The news that his madam was driven out by Ru and Great Elder Princess was now widely spread in the capital city, and all kinds of unpleasant words were thrown at Duke Yong's mansion. This was also an important reason why Countess Yong didn't come to Qin's mansion today. No matter who she met, she felt ashamed, especially the madams she was familiar with. Although they didn't say anything, their expressions and looks were all disdainful. Is and great elder princess going to hold a banquet again? Duke Yong snorted coldly and continued to ask. She was just a princess with an idle position. Did she really think that she had any real power? They really regarded her as the Empress Dowager in the palace. They didn't know that the princess mansion had long been in decline, and there was only and great elder princess left in the princess mansion. It's not from and great elder princess mansion, but from Duke Xing's mansion. And great elder princess transferred it to me on behalf of her. Qin Huaiyong turned around the desk, sat in front of it, picked up the invitation card on the table, and said after looking at it for a few times. What? Duke Xing's mansion? Duke Yong's face changed. Duke Xing's mansion was not Duke Yong's mansion. Duke Yong's mansion was far higher than Duke Yong's mansion in terms of title and holy favor, even higher than his brother-in-law, Marquis of Fengyang, who had real power. Duke Yong's mansion looked beautiful outside, but in fact, it didn't have many achievements. In the circle of bigwigs in the capital city, everyone knew that Duke Yong's mansion had actually been in decline. Both the current Duke Yong and the next heir Dian were mediocre people who didn't have any achievements. Dian couldn't even be regarded as a mediocre person. He was just a playboy among the nobles in the capital city. Duke Xing's mansion couldn't be compared with Duke Xing's mansion, which was now in the middle of the sky. Yes, it's from Duke Xing's mansion. They want to thank Wanru for saving Master Hao of Duke Xing's mansion. This master should also be the grandson of and great elder princess, right? Qin Huaiyong had taken the initiative now. His face was gentle and calm, and he continued to look at the card in his hand without raising his eyes, as if he didn't see Duke Yong's changed face. Second Miss Qin saved the master of Duke Xing's mansion, so Duke Xing wants to thank Qin's mansion. Therefore, he asked and great elder princess to transfer the card to you? Duke Yong suddenly felt that he couldn't look down on Qin Huaiyong anymore. He didn't expect that Qin Huaiyong could really get in touch with Duke Xing. If Duke Xing really talked to Qin Huaiyong, it would only take him 1 or 2 days to get the job. Qin Huaiyong was a general who had fought in the battlefield and made some military achievements. This was also the reason why he was stationed in one place alone before. Now he was transferred back to the capital city, and it was only a matter of time that he would be put in an important position. If Duke Yong blocked him too much, he was afraid that he wouldn't be on good terms with him. Moreover, now Duke Xing's mansion was there, so he couldn't block him even if he wanted to. Thinking of this, Duke Yong smiled again and said to Qin Huaiyong, "Then you stay here and watch it. We need to make friends with Duke Xing's mansion. I will go to see my sister first." She didn't do it well this time, and she really blamed herself. "Okay, thank you, brother-in-law," Qin Huaiyong said with a smile, but his eyes fell on the card in his hand. This card was not sent to him by Ru and great elder princess, but to Qin Wanru. It was Qin Wanru who sent Qin Yu to transfer the card to him. Originally, he just wanted him to have a look and ask his opinion. He didn't make a decision at the moment, so he just threw it on the table. He was worried about Qin Wanru, such a little girl, going in and out of Duke Xing's mansion. He didn't dare to let Shui Rulin, who was too tired now, go out with her. Chapter 164. The general said that he had rejected it. Qin Yu answered, "That's good." Qin Wanru smiled slightly, put down the small shower, and wiped her hands with a handkerchief. Before things were clear, she did not want to get too close to Duke Xing's mansion. This invitation card was bound to be sent to Qin Huaiyong, and Duke Yong came at the right time. On the one hand, Qin Huaiyong could take advantage of it, and on the other hand, Qin Huaiyong could reject this invitation card. It was better and more reasonable for Qin Huaiyong to do it than her. She had a suspicion, and she also guessed it with this invitation card. At this time, some doubts had been cleared, but to take care of the sick? She did not want to go. Her watery eyes fell on her handkerchief, and she watched her white and tender fingers wipe them one by one. Her long and black eyelashes fluttered a few times, just covering all the emotions in her eyes. "Miss, Madame Du, really want to take care of the sick?" Nanny Yu was really worried. Looking at Qin Wanru's unhurried look, she could not help but ask again. Yes, to take care of the sick. Since Duke Yong's mansion asked me to, how can I not go? Qin Wanru smiled slightly, turned back to sit in the chair, looked up at Nanny Yu and said, Nanny Yu, please ask Miss Chi if she wants to go with me when I go to take care of the sick tomorrow. Miss wants to go with Miss Chi? She will not be willing, right? Nanny Yu did not understand what she meant. She will be willing. I heard that the heir of Duke Yong will stay in the mansion to take care of Madam. Qin Wanru raised her head and said calmly. Miss Chi likes the heir of Duke Yong? But he is the husband that Madam chose for first miss. Nanny Yu was so shocked that her eyes widened. So what? Qin Wanru said leisurely. In fact, she already knew what Qi Rongji was thinking when she first came that day. How could she give up such a good opportunity? Madam will vent her anger on you. Nanny Yu frowned and said worriedly. Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and said with a bit of playfulness, will she not be angry with me now that I am like this? Hearing what she said, Nanny Yu was speechless. Looking at the pretty miss in front of her, she felt so distressed that she couldn't say anything. She didn't know why Madam was so cruel to plot against the second Mississippi. Even if the second miss was not her biological daughter, the second miss was also a well-behaved and lovely girl. Why did Madam want to ruin the second miss for the first miss? I also think it has nothing to do with our miss even if there is something wrong. Anyway, Madam D always wants our miss to bear all the bad names of the first Mississippi. She wants our miss to be the stepping stone of the first Mississippi. Then why should our miss care about her? This time, they made such a big scene just to torment young miss and make young miss attend to the sick. Who knows what will happen? Yu Jie was completely on Qin Wanru's side. Thinking of the situation at that time, she snorted and said. She had seen Madam's look at that time. She could clearly see the look that Madam wanted Miss to die immediately. Nanny Yu, I also think it is good. At least Miss Chi is here. Even if Madam or the first Miss wants to do something, they have to be careful. Qing Yue also supported Yu Jie and said. Qin Wanru smiled sweetly. Of course, this was also a reason. But the most important thing was that she could use Qi Rongji to distract Madame D and her daughter, so that they would not keep staring at her. With Qi Rongji, who had an ulterior motive, it was impossible not to be chaotic. Then I will go and ask Miss Qi. Nanny Yu could not help but smile when she saw that they were protecting Qin Wanru wholeheartedly. She nodded repeatedly, but her eyes turned red inexplicably. She turned sideways and wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. There was a trace of determination in her eyes. Even the two little servant girls were standing by Mrs.'s side wholeheartedly, so she should protect Miss even more. Nanny Yu, wait a moment. Let Qing Yu go. I have something to ask you. Qin Wanru suddenly stopped her and asked Qing Yu to pass the message to Qi Rongji. Qing Yu nodded and left in a hurry. Nanny Yu, did anything happen to Qin Shui these 2 days? Qin Wanru asked. She entrusted all the things in the courtyard to Nanny Yu. Even if she had something to do, she did not ask Nanny Yu to go outside. Nanny Yu thought for a while and said, Qing Shui's temperament has changed a lot compared to when she was in Jiangzhou. She seems to be more enthusiastic all of a sudden, especially Nanny Dong and Dong Xiu. When Nanny Dong is not here, she even takes the initiative to accompany Dong Xiu. The two of them are now very close. They are almost bosom friends. Qing Shui was under her surveillance, so naturally, she could see it clearly. Dong Xiu has a good relationship with her? Qin Wanru frowned. Qing Shui was a problematic person. In order to solve her problem, Madame D deliberately schemed against Chu Lu. Of course, part of the reason was Chu Lu, but one of the most important reasons was Qing Shui. Madame D and Qin Yuru sent this servant girl to her. What they wanted was not small. She had hinted to Nanny Dong that there was something wrong with Qin Shui. Nanny Dong did not care about it, but she did not expect that Qin Shui had such a good relationship with Dong Xiu. Did Nanny Dong not tell Dong Xiu? Is there anything else besides this? There's nothing else. I rarely send her out. She's only in charge of the menial work in the courtyard. She's Mrs. Personal maidservant in name, but she doesn't have many responsibilities now. Don't you think we're treating her coldly? Nanyu said. Because of Qin Wanru's order, Qin Shui, who was the principal servant girl, was not even allowed to enter Qin Wanru's room. As long as she behaved well, Madame D and Qin Yuru would not dare to fall out with her. Qin Yuru finally came. When she saw Qi Rongji standing in the corridor, she was stunned for a moment. She did not expect to see Qi Rongji here. After the three of them greeted each other, Qin Yuru said, "Rongji, why are you here?" "Sister Wanru and I came to take care of Madame D. This time, I came to the capital city with the care of your mansion. This time, Madame D is sick, and I feel sorry." Qi Rongji tried to soften her voice. "You want to take care of Madame D?" Qin Yuru was so surprised that her eyes suddenly widened. Although the two families were old friends, they were not relatives. This was so surprising. "It's a token of my heart," Qi Rongji said with a smile. Such a gentle smile made Qin Yuru could not help but take a step back. Her eyes became more vigilant. What did Qi Rongji want to do? How can you do this? You are a guest." Qin Yuru calmed down and reprimanded slightly. "But now I live in Qin's mansion. All this is entrusted by my father and mother to Madame D and the general. I also remember Madame D and the general's care for me. How can I not come to take care of Madame D when she is sick? Otherwise, my big brother will be the first to punish me." Qi Rongji became more and more gentle with a face of gratitude. It seemed that she really wanted to take care of Madame D. Qin Yuru was so angry that her nose was almost crooked. When did Qi Rongji become so well-educated and polite? Moreover, she looked very grateful. Did she want to make trouble again? She had made trouble in and great elder princess's mansion before. Qin Yuru did not want to make trouble again at this time. "My mother appreciates your kindness, but please go back." Qin Yuru refused. "Why don't you let me take care of Madame D? I really want to thank Madame D as my mother." Qi Rongji's eyes turned red. She reached out to take Qin Yuru's hand and shook it hard with a look of being wronged. This made Qin Yuru more annoyed. She reached out to pull Qi Rongji's hand angrily and asked in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" Chapter 165. Behind Qin Yuru, Di Yen tilted his head slightly and looked at Qi Rongji from head to toe with a gentle smile on his face. He came a little late and saw Qin Yuru pulling down Qi Rongji's hand impolitely. Qi Rongji looked very aggrieved and her eyes were red and a little timid. Her eyes really resembled his cousin, so he couldn't help but rush over and ask, "Cousin?" Qin Yuru looked back and called out unhappily when she saw Di Yen. "Your Highness." Qi Rongji was secretly happy, but her eyes looked even more aggrieved. After bowing sideways, she purposely wiped the corner of her eyes as if she was wiping away her tears. However, there was a trace of a smile on her face. In Di Yan's eyes, it was a forced smile. Qin Wanru also called out politely, "Cousin." Then she stepped aside. She saw the expressions of the three people present. Di Yan's eyes were full of pity, Qi Rongji's evasive look of grievance, and Qin Yuru's eyes were full of anger. Her lips curved slightly and her long eyelashes fluttered twice. She continued to stand obediently as if she didn't see the turbulent undercurrent between them. She had just arrived in the capital and had a lot of things to do. She really didn't have time to play along with Madame D, nor did she want Madame D to torture her and make her take care of Qi Rongji. "Cousin Yuru, what's wrong?" Di Yen reluctantly withdrew his eyes from Qi Rongji and turned to ask Qin Yuru. Once again, he praised in his heart that Jiangzhou was really full of beauties. Not only was his cousin Qin Yuru a beauty, but even the daughter of Magistrate Qi was also a beauty. Both of them had their own merits and were extremely beautiful. As for Qin Wanru, although she was outstanding, she was still too young. At first glance, it was difficult to treat her as an adult girl. Therefore, compared to Qi Rongji, Qin Wanru was not attractive. First Miss Qi insisted on taking care of mother. "What a joke!" Qin Yuru said impatiently. She just happened to see Dian's eyes falling on Qi Rongji and his reluctance to leave her. How annoying! First Miss Qi wants to take care of Aunt. Di Yen finally found a legitimate opportunity to talk to Qi Rongji. He looked up at her and asked, My father and mother asked Madame D and General Qin to let me come to the capital city. They told me again and again that the two families are good friends. After I came to the capital city, I should treat Madame D and General Qin as my relatives and be filial to them like my parents. Now Madame D is sick, I have to take care of her, otherwise, I will feel uneasy. Qi Rongji said softly. Di Yen nodded and the admiration in his eyes became more obvious. She was indeed a kind girl. Although she came from a small place like Jiangzhou, her manners were not lacking at all. In fact, her manners were even better than those of ordinary young ladies from aristocratic families. If that's the case then, Di Yen said. Since they were here, they could go in together. It was good to have one more person to take care of the sick. Qin Wanru was too young to know anything about taking care of the sick. Qi Rongji looked more reliable. Cousin, mother has to make the decision. Seeing that Di Yen agreed, Qin Yuru hurriedly stopped him. Being interrupted by Qin Yuru, Di Yen was a little unhappy, but he did not take it to heart. It was indeed up to Madame D to make the decision. Let's go in together. It's a windy place here and it's very cold. My cousins are so thin and weak, how can they bear it? Although Qin Yuru was in charge here, Di Yen still made the decision to bring them into the room. It was indeed cold to stand in the corridor. He had only been here for a while, but he already felt like shivering. It was a cloudy day today. Although it did not rain, it was very cold. Di Yen turned and went into Madame D's outer room. Watching Di Yen go in, Qin Yuru could only helplessly ask Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji to follow him. Originally, her mother deliberately let Qin Wanru stay here to feel the wind. When they entered the inner room, an old maid hurried over. Seeing them, she greeted them with a smile. Your Highness, First Miss, Second Miss, and Miss Qi, our madam has woken up and is taking medicine now. You can go in now. They followed the old maid around the screen and into the inner room. Madame D was taking medicine. A little maid knelt on one knee in front of the bed, holding a bowl of medicine in her hand, and was carefully feeding Madame D. A white cloth was tied on her head, and she looked haggard. Behind her, there was a thick cushion, and the room was filled with the strong smell of medicine. Qin Wanru sniffed with her nose and realized that Madame D did not look like what she saw. She was just using some ordinary medicine, and the dosage was not much. It was just that the smell was a little strong, and it seemed that she deliberately made the smell a little stronger. Qin Wanru was very clear in her mind. And in this strong smell of medicine, Qin Wanru smelled a faintly discernible strange smell. Her long eyelashes paused and then fluttered twice. Her eyes then fell on the little maid who was kneeling on one knee in front of the bed. She was a very small maid, about the same height as herself. The room was full of maids and old maids who were much bigger than her, but none of them came up to help her. It could be seen that this little maid was struggling. Her face was tense, and her knees were slightly trembling. There was a feeling of exhaustion. So all of this had been prepared for a long time. After everyone came forward and bowed, Qin Yuru took a step forward, and was about to take the bowl of medicine in the hands of the maid, intending to feed Madame D herself. But she was stopped by Nanny Zhou. Oh, my first miss, your height is not suitable. It's okay if you feel uncomfortable kneeling, but you can't feed Madame D. This height is a little too high. But I'm taking care of mother, shouldn't I feed mother the medicine myself? Qin Yuru said hesitantly, as if she really wanted to feed Madame D the medicine. Qin Wanru lowered her head slightly, as if she did not see Qin Yuru's glance. She looked like she was in a daze. She was such a small maid, and at this time, she was the only one who could correspond to her. It seemed that this was the so-called taking care of mother that Madame D and Qin Yuru had prepared for her. First miss, you're a little too tall. Nanny Zhou shook her head and said helplessly, if only you were a little shorter, you could just scoop the medicine to Madame D's mouth. My hands can't reach straight, otherwise it would be best for me to drink the medicine myself. Instead, I asked you all to take care of Madame D. I'm afraid that this little maid can't stand it, so I have to trouble you all. Madame D said with a bitter smile. Her face without makeup looked old and a little tired. Qin Wanru knew that it was not only because of her injury. Madame D's life now was not the same as in Jiangzhou. When things went wrong, it was easy for people to look old. Hearing her words, almost everyone looked at Qin Wanru. After all, Qin Wanru was the only one present who was suitable. At this time, if not her, who else could do it? Madame D really wanted to force her to humiliate her. First, she forced her to kneel, and then what? Accidentally spilling the medicine on her face or on her body. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. She raised her head, and a pair of cold eyes fell on Madame D. Then, a smile slowly appeared on her face. Madam, since Big Sister is not suitable, let me do it. We can't let the heir of Duke Qin help to feed the medicine here. Although I heard that the children of aristocratic families in the capital practice the horse stance, they can do it for a long time even if they have to squat. After saying this, she took a few steps forward to take the medicine bowl. Di Yen was a little embarrassed. He was not good at the horse stance. He was only good at fishing for 3 days and drying the net for 2 days. It was good enough that he had a good posture. How could he squat down and feed the medicine to Madame D? Second miss, let me do it. Seeing Di Yan's expression, Qi Rongji rolled her eyes and suddenly pulled Qin Wanru. She thought that standing up at this time would solve Di Yan's embarrassment, and he would definitely have a better impression of her. Originally, she came for Di Yan, so how could she let go of such a great opportunity to show off? This is not very good. Qin Wanru looked at her awkwardly, and then looked at Di Yan who was beside her. What's wrong with it? I originally came to take care of the sick with sincerity. How could I dislike it? Even if I'm a little taller, I can kneel a little lower. As long as I have this sincerity, I can definitely do it well. As Qi Rongji spoke, she took 2 steps forward, grabbed the medicine bowl from the hands of the little maid, and was about to kneel. Quick, hold Miss Qi. At this time, Madame D also reacted and hurriedly shouted. If she really asked Qi Rongji to kneel and take care of her like this, it would be unreasonable. Originally, Qi's mansion had already used the previous incident as an excuse. If there was another incident, she was afraid that when the time came, they would be even weaker than the people of Qi's mansion. Nanny Zhou also reacted quickly. She hurriedly reached out to hold Qi Rongji and kept shouting, "No, no, no. Miss Qi, let me do it. Big sister, quickly help me get the medicine bowl." Qin Wanru blinked her big eyes twice, and also stepped forward. She reached out as if she wanted to take the medicine bowl that Nanny Zhou and Qi Rongji were holding together. Hearing what she said, Qin Yuru had to step forward and also reached out to grab it. Just like that, several people bumped into each other. No one knew who bumped into each other, or whose hands slipped, but the bowl of medicine, which still seemed to be steaming hot, just fell on Madame D. Lying on the bed, Madame D could not avoid it in time. Seeing the bowl of medicine falling on her, she hurriedly reached out to block it, only to hear ouch, clang, ah, all kinds of sounds were in a mess. Fortunately, most of the medicine splashed on Madame D's body, and only a small part splashed on Madame D's hands. Even so, she still screamed because of the heat. Originally, she did not have any good intentions and wanted to splash Qin Wanru's medicine, so she specially ordered someone to make it a little hot. She did not expect that it would actually splash on her. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart, and it hurt. The empty bowl fell from the bed and hit the ground, breaking into a few pieces. Some pieces even splashed. Qi Rongji was the first to bear the brunt, and her wrist was scratched by a piece. She immediately screamed in pain and sat on the ground. Nanny Zhou fell by the side of the bed and also hurt her foot. Qin Wanru was lying behind Qi Rongji, pressing her other hand in pain. Another piece of porcelain fell by her foot, and it seemed that it was also hurt. Your Highness, I really didn't do it on purpose. Please help me prove my innocence. Otherwise, when my father enters the capital, he will definitely punish me. Qi Rongji cried so hard that her voice could not be heard. She leaned on the table and her whole body trembled. Obviously, she was very afraid of the Qi's family rules. He didn't expect that an aristocratic family with a history of more than 100 years could have such a strict upbringing. Di Yan's impression of Qi Rongji improved. Looking at Qi Rongji, who was crying like a ball, and then at his cousin, who was still looking at him coldly with red eyes. He felt inexplicably annoyed. Wasn't his cousin the most gentle person? Why was she so fierce now? Could it be that what his cousin showed him before was what she wanted him to see? Was what his mother said true? Cousin Yu, let them go first. They can't take care of Aunt like this. Instead, they will make a mess. If people see this, they will think that something serious has happened. Di Yen said unhappily. From inside came Madame D's angry rebuke. He seemed to hear the faint sound of slapping. Here came Qi Rongji's crying and Qin Yuru's fierce voice. Suddenly, Yen felt a headache and annoyed. But they scalded my mother. Is it okay? Qin Yuru bit her lip and said, this is also an accident, an accident. Cousin Yu, we still want to deal with the burn on Aunt's hand. Both of them are also injured. It is useless to stay here. Instead, they will add to the trouble. Dian said, Your Highness, there is no need. Let's stay here. I am worried about Madame D. Qi Rongji raised her head. 2 lines of crystal tears were still flowing down her white and tender cheeks, which made her look more delicate. It's okay. You go back first and deal with the wounds. Later, the doctor will come. When Aunt is healed, I will bring someone to check on your injuries. Di Yen directly made the decision, ignoring Qin Yuru. Thank you, Your Highness. Hearing that Di Yen would come, Qi Rongji stopped crying. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief, and her face was faintly flushed. Then go back first. Di Yen waved his hand and said, It was a mess here. Qin Yuru did not look like a person who could be in charge, so Di Yen had to take the responsibility himself. At this time, Qi Rongji was crying again. She held Chun Yi's hand and obediently limped away. Qin Wanru did not stand on ceremony. After bowing deeply to Di Yen, she also left slowly with the help of her servant girl. Cousin. Seeing that the 2 troublemakers had left just like that, Qin Yuru stamped her feet and shouted angrily. Cousin Yu, you go to see Aunt first. I will go see if the doctor has come. Di Yen touched his head with a headache. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake for his father to ask him to come to Qin's mansion to take care of his sick aunt. After saying that, he ignored Qin Yuru, who was pouting coquettishly, and turned to stride out. When Qin Wanru returned to her room, Yu Jie and several maids immediately helped her into the inner room. She did not limp too much along the way, so the maids thought that she was not seriously injured. However, when they lifted her skirt, they found that her right calf was dripping with blood, and even the corner of her pants was wet. Miss, how did you get hurt so badly? Yu Jie was so scared that her face turned pale. She was behind Qin Wanru just now. She wanted to pull Qin Wanru back, but Qin Wanru got rid of her and fell over. Yu Jie was shocked at that time, but she also knew that Qin Wanru rushed over by herself. However, even if she rushed up on her own, it was impossible for her to get hurt so badly. Qi Rongji, who was the nearest to her, was not hurt so badly. She only had a slight scratch on her foot. From her angle, Yu Jie could see Qi Rongji's wound, but she did not see Qin Wanru's. She did not expect that her miss would be hurt so badly. Qin Yu carefully rolled up her trousers. As expected, there was a big cut on her calf. It was long and looked deep. The blood had not completely coagulated, and the wound looked a little scary. Qin Yu hurriedly covered it with a handkerchief, and the blood immediately dyed the plain handkerchief. The faces of the people in the room changed. Miss? Nanny Yu was so anxious that she was about to cry. After thinking for a while, she said, I'll go see if the doctor is here. I'll go to the door of Madame's courtyard and wait. Nanny Yu, you don't have to go. He'll be here soon. I hurt myself, so it's no big deal. Qin Wanru's face was also very pale, and her lips were a lot darker, but there was a smile on her face. Miss, how could you do this? Nanny Yu's voice rose a little involuntarily. She simply did not believe that her miss would do such a thing. Qin Wanru leaned back, and the smile on her face became cold. She slightly raised the corner of her eyes with a bit of hostility. A lot of things can happen when you take care of a sick person. If Qi Rongji did not interfere today, I'm afraid that bowl of medicine was prepared for me. There's medicine in the bowl that can't heal easily after a burn. If such a bowl of boiling medicine was poured on Qin Wanru's skin, Even if she did not die, she would probably be crippled. Even if it was not completely poured on her face and only splashed a little, it would not be so easy to get rid of it. Moreover, Qin Wanru also smelled some other medicine in it. The smell was different from the usual medicine. It came from a special medicine. The smell of this medicine was a little special, but it was mixed with the original strange smell of medicine, so it was not obvious. This medicine had a very special effect, which was to make it difficult for the wound to heal. Madame D and Qin Wanru came prepared. Madame D is so vicious. Nanny Yu gasped. Madame D has been vicious for a long time. What should we do now, miss? Yu Jie originally grew up in the temple, so she did not have much respect for Madame D. In a while, Di Yen will probably accompany the doctor to help us. Qin Yuru will definitely come as well. Qin Wanru said slowly, she will definitely not believe that I am really injured, and I am so seriously injured. She will definitely suggest to see my wound in person, but you guys will not let her see it. Madame D and Qin Yuru's plan failed, and Madame D's hand was burned instead. They would definitely not let it go, and would definitely come to see her and Qin Rongji's wounds, especially Yu Jie. They would definitely not let her off easily. It would be best if they could get evidence that she was pretending to be injured, and then they could push all the blame onto her. Rest assured, Mississippi. I will definitely protect you and not let Elder Miss see your wound. Nanny Yu said. After saying this, she hesitated for a moment and finally asked, Miss, are you really not willing to let Elder Miss see it? Of course I have to let her see it. Not only her, but also father. If you don't let Qin Yuru see it, Qin Yuru will definitely be unwilling, and she will think that I am even more pretentious. At that time, she will make a fuss. Yu Jie at that time, quickly go and ask father to come over. You can leave quickly, Qin Wanru instructed Yu Jie. Take care of the sick? She would not go and let Madame D have all kinds of reasons to deal with her. The reason was sometimes very simple. She would beat Qin Yuru at her own game. No matter how powerful Duke Yong's mansion was, they could not control the fact that they were also injured, and it was because of Madame D. She cast the bait and waited for Qin Yuru to take the bait. And Qin Yuru did not let Qin Wanru down. She had just changed her clothes in the room and was lying on the bed when she heard the noise outside. It was a mess. Chapter 167. She's injured. Why didn't you let the doctor see her? Could it be that she's not hurt? Qin Yuru's eyes fell on Nanny Yu and she said unkindly. Although Di Yin didn't say anything, his eyes were filled with doubt. A doctor in his 30s or 40s was following behind him. They had just come from Qi Rongji's place. Qi Rongji was indeed injured, but her injury was not serious. After Qin Yuru asked the maid to examine her, they concluded that she did not seem to be limping at all. She mocked Qi Rongji on the spot and then brought the doctor to Qin Wanru's place. Compared to Qi Rongji, Qin Yuru thought that Qin Wanru's injury wasn't a problem. Qin Wanru was behind Qi Rongji at that time, and Qi Rongji at least saw blood. Qin Wanru might have deliberately taken advantage of the situation. So when she heard Nanny Yu say that Qin Wanru didn't want to see the doctor, she couldn't help but mock her. Madame D's hand was injured, and it wasn't light. The most important thing was that there was something in the medicine, and it was quite a lot. Originally, she wanted to sprinkle it on Qin Wanru's body. No matter where it was sprinkled, it might be difficult to remove the scar. Unexpectedly, it was sprinkled on Madame D's body. There was even a drop on her face, which was much more serious than the one on Qin Yuru's face. How could Qin Yuru be in a good mood? First, miss, the doctor is a man, and our miss's leg is injured. It's not very convenient. Nanny Yu said with a troubled look. What do you mean not convenient? It's not like the doctor will see her himself. Let Mei Yan see her and tell the doctor what medicine to prescribe and how much medicine to prescribe. It will be more clear, Qin Yuru said impatiently. Eldest young mistress, you don't actually have to look at it. You can just prescribe some ointment. I've already bandaged second young mistress wound just now, so it's not bleeding anymore. Nanny Yu said tactfully with a smile. Not bleeding anymore? So there's no injury? Since there's no injury, why did you pretend to be seriously injured just now? Did you do it on purpose because you don't want to take care of mother? Qin Yuru said angrily. She glanced at the tightly closed door of the inner chamber and sneered. Today, she would tear off Qin Wanru's disguise no matter what. It was just a suspicion at first, but now it was almost certain that Qin Wanru was pretending. She's not bleeding now, but just now, there was a lot of blood. Our miss was seriously injured. Seeing that Qin Yuru had misunderstood, Naniyu hurriedly explained. Why can't I watch it? It's not a big deal if I let Mian watch it. There's no need to refuse and act like you can't let others watch it. Qin Yuru said coldly. She had to watch it today. The wound has just been bandaged. If we take it off again, I'm afraid it won't be good for Mrs. Injury. This old servant thinks. It's better to ask the doctor to prescribe some medicine. Nanny Yu said earnestly. Cousin Yu, leave some medicine for Cousin Wan first. Di Yan said. Cousin, how can you say that? Qi Rongji's injuries are not serious. How could she be so serious? Qin Yuru stamped her feet angrily. Di Yan was silent for a moment and looked at Nanny Yu suspiciously. Are they really that badly injured? Crown Prince, you are really heavy. I'm not lying and neither is our miss. Nanny Yu was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. She spread her hands and looked at Di Yan, pleading for help. This made Qin Yuru even more angry. She pushed Nanny Yu away and was about to barge in. First miss, please wait. Our miss is injured and is resting now. Please don't disturb our miss's rest. Qin Yu cut in from the side and reached out to stop Qin Yuru, looking like she was not going to let her in. This made Qin Yuru even more certain that Qin Wanru was guilty. She reached out to push Qin Yu away again, this time with more force. Qin Yu staggered and was pushed into a chair by the side. The chair then hit the tea table. A few teacups on the tea table rolled down and fell to the ground. Seeing that Qin Yu was about to fall to the ground, another servant girl seemed to want to hold her. Unexpectedly, Qin Yu did not slow down and hit the flower rack on the side. The row of flowers on the rack, together with the porcelain that held the flowers, all fell to the ground and broke into pieces one after another. Qin Yuru was also shocked. She took 2 steps back and did not fall on her. Tables, chairs, flower racks, flowers, and all kinds of porcelain were smashed into pieces on the ground. It was a mess. Fortunately, no one was hit. Qin Yu was also pulled aside by the servant girl who had sharp eyes and quick hands. However, everything in the room was destroyed. Everyone was stunned. Not only inside the room, but also the servants outside the room were stunned. Did the first miss bring people to destroy the second miss's room? Big sister, why did you come to smash my room? No one knew when the door of the inner room was opened. The curtain was slightly lifted, and Qin Wanru stood weakly by the door. Her face was pale and haggard, and her red lips were also pale at this time, showing a clear morbidity. Qin Yuru wanted to say no and that it was an accident, but she was interrupted by Qin Wanru. Big sister, my leg is injured today. Big sister and madam insist that I take care of Qin Wanru. I will go, but can you let me rest for a day and go tomorrow? You were pretending? Qin Yuru was distracted by Qin Yuru's words. Cousin Yu, Cousin Wanru is really injured. Di Yan pulled Qin Yuru and whispered. Looking at Qin Wanru like this, all his doubts disappeared. She did not need to look at the wound to know that she was indeed injured. What the servant said before was true. Big sister, why do you always have a prejudice against me? You always think that everything I say is not true? You think that I don't want to take care of Madam? Madam is sick now, and now she is injured. Shouldn't Big sister be taking care of Madam at this time? Why do you look so aggressive, as if I am guilty if I don't go now? Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes. Her eyes were as clear as water, but with a bit of coldness. She leaned against the door frame with one of her legs dangling. Anyone could tell that she was really hurt. Let Mian see whether it is true or not. Qin Yuru sneered. No matter what Qin Wanru said, she would not believe it. Moreover, the more Qin Wanru refused to let Mian see, the more she felt that Qin Wanru was pretending. Big sister, what if I don't want Mian to see? Qin Wanru's eyes also became cold. Her body slightly swayed, and Qin Yu hurried over to hold her. You dare not let her see? Qin Yuru said coldly, increasingly feeling that she was reasonable. Big sister brought people to destroy my house because you think I'm a fake, right? Does madam know that you are here to make trouble? Qin Wanru coughed in a low voice. Although there were few people, they were not weak. She raised her watery eyes and asked. Di Yan reached out and pulled Qin Yuru again. He became more and more annoyed. Even if he was a playboy, he felt that there was something wrong with Qin Yuru's response. The room was full of broken pieces. It seemed that Qin Yuru was unreasonable. Shouldn't she talk nicely at this time? So what if mother knows? Qin Wanru, you don't want to take care of madam, do you? Qin Yuru did not intend to let go of Qin Wanru. She shook Di Yan's hand and said, I will go tomorrow. I will take a break today. Can't madam and you stand it? Qin Wanru frowned slightly. She looked at the mess in the room and said, So madam asked you to smash my room? Compared to Qin Yuru's aggressive attitude, Qin Wanru seemed to be particularly tolerant. She even made some concessions. Or it could be called looking at the big picture. So what? Qin Yuru understood that Qin Wanru was feeling guilty. She raised her voice even more. Just when she finished speaking, she heard a cold voice behind her. Yuru, who asked you to smash your sister's room? Qin Huayong strode in. He saw the broken pieces in the room and then looked at Di Yan who was standing aside. He was so angry that his face turned green. In the past, he did not care if there were any problems between sisters. But now, it was in front of outsiders. How could Qin Huayong not be angry? Looking at Di Yan's face, he knew that Qin Yuru's current behavior made Di Yan very unhappy. Or it could be said that no man would like the woman he was going to marry was not a dignified lady from an aristocratic family, but a shrew. Father, second sister doesn't want to take care of mother, so she deliberately pretended to be injured. Seeing Qin Huayong coming over, Qin Yuru immediately came up to complain. She had already sent someone to inform Qin Huayong about what happened in Madame D's courtyard. Deliberately pretending to be injured? Qin Huayong looked at Qin Wanru, his meaning unclear. General, second miss is really injured, and it is very serious. If you don't believe it, you can ask someone to check. You can't let elder miss frame our second miss. Nanny Yu rushed over from the side and knelt in front of Qin Huayong. She immediately burst into tears. Elder miss insisted that second miss is lying and even smashed the room like this. Second miss promised to let her rest for a day and take care of mother tomorrow, but elder miss still didn't agree. Father, let someone in to check the wound. Qin Wanru looked at the broken pieces on the floor helplessly. Then she raised her eyes. There was a bit of sadness in her watery eyes, but her face was very calm. After saying that, she turned and walked inside. Main, go in and have a look. Qin Yuru was quite proud of herself. Miss. Mei Yan suddenly panicked. Hurry up and go. Qin Yuru said sternly. Mei Yan could only go into the inner room. Qin Wanru was already sitting on the bed. Qin Yu helped her lift up her skirt, and the bandage on her calf was slowly unwrapped. Some bright red blood had already seeped out. Mei Yan's face turned pale, and her teeth began to chatter, but she dared not say anything. The bandage was unwrapped, and there was a strong smell of blood inside. When the last wound was unwrapped, a wound that was much bigger than Qin Rongji's was revealed. Qin Wanru's calf was already thin, and the wound almost reached half of her calf. It was a bloody mess, and no one knew how deep it was. It seemed that because no medicine was used, when the white bandage was unwrapped, it spread out again. The smell of blood was getting stronger. Chapter 168. Is second miss not hurt? Qin Yuru asked in a hurry when she saw Mien coming out. She looked proud. First miss? Mei Yan stuttered. Her face was still pale and her body was trembling. She looked at Qin Yuru helplessly. Say something. Qin Yuru said sternly when she saw that the situation was not right. Second miss is hurt very, very badly. Mei Yan said with a tremble. She looked at Qin Yuru pitifully. She had to tell the truth. She would know if she sent someone to check. But she also knew the consequences of telling the truth. First miss would not spare her. Her legs went soft and she knelt down with a plop. Anyone could see that she was trembling. Impossible. Qin Yuru was stunned. Then she reacted and said with her eyes wide open. Why not? Qin Wanru held Qin Yu's hand and stood in front of the curtain again. Big sister, if you don't believe me, you can ask more people to check. I'll see for myself. Qin Yuru did not know where she got the temper to not admit defeat. She could not suppress her anger. Enough. Qin Huayong's eyebrows were filled with anger as he shouted. He kicked the chair beside him away. The chair fell to the ground and made a loud thud. Everyone in the room quietened down. Father. Qin Yuru was scared and said timidly. Qin Wanru stood there silently. She held Qin Yu with one hand and her long eyelashes slightly drooped. She did not say anything. Isn't your mother sick? She got injured again this time. Go and take care of her. Qin Huayong said harshly. Father. Qin Yuru was embarrassed to be reprimanded by Qin Huayong in front of Di Yan. Her face turned red and tears overflowed. You will take care of her from now on. Your sister is so badly hurt. Why do you need to take care of her? Qin Huayong understood that this was caused by Madame D and Qin Yuru. Originally, Madame D made a big fuss and said that she was seriously injured. For the sake of Duke Yong's mansion, he tolerated it. After all, it was indeed because of him that Madame D was also injured. But now such a thing happened, and it seemed that Madame D wanted to force his little daughter to death. He couldn't bear this anger. Father. Qin Yuru felt wronged. How could Qin Wanru be so badly hurt? She still could not believe it. Go back quickly. Don't make trouble again. Qin Huayong's eyes were very cold. He was very disappointed with Qin Yuru. He had higher expectations for this daughter of his. Madame D had behaved recklessly and brought up her daughter to be like this. It seemed that he had to discuss with his mother and not let Madame D lead her daughter astray. After being reprimanded by Qin Huayong again and again, Qin Yuru's face was as red as blood. She looked at Qin Huayong and then at Di Yan, who had his head lowered, and burst into tears. She turned around and ran out. She ran a little too fast and accidentally bumped into the corner of a chair that had fallen to the ground. She was inexplicably injured, and in the end, she had to be mocked. She did not have high hopes. Thinking of this, his expression softened and he smiled. The doctor is looking at cousin Wanru's injury. She should be fine with some medicine. How is Miss Chi's injury? I'm fine. It's nothing serious. It's just that when my feet touched the ground, it hurt a little. Qi Rongji's feet touched the ground as if she wanted to walk to show Di Yan, but her feet wobbled and she almost fell again. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted, and it was obvious that she was really in pain. Di Yan quickly reached out to help her, and his eyes fell on her legs. Does it hurt so much? No, it really doesn't hurt. It's just a little inconvenient. Qi Rongji said softly, shaking her head rapidly, as if she was afraid that Di Yan would not believe her. But her hand was holding Di Yan's. In order to support her strength, her whole body almost leaned toward him. A faint fragrance floated over, and it was rich. Di Yan lowered his head, and his eyes fell on her delicate face. His breathing quickened, but he did not push her away. The expression on his face became more and more gentle. How can you come out to sea in your current condition? Let me help you back. This is not good, is it? Qi Rongji's face became shy, and she gently pushed Di Yan. Then I'll watch you go back. Di Yan looked around and let go of Qi Rongji's hand. He tidied his robe and nodded. It was indeed not convenient. In Jifang Pavilion, Nanny Yu and a few servant girls cleverly cleaned up the room. Qin Huayong sat on the chair in the middle, and Qin Wanru was helped to sit on the chair on the other side. The doctor had already left with the medicine. It was very quiet in the room, and it was so strange that it gave people an indescribable feeling. Nanny Yu stood behind Qin Wanru, looking at the floor in front of her. She was anxious. Although her head was lowered, she could still feel the atmosphere in the room. The two servant girls, Qin Yu and Yu Jie, had already been moved out. Wanru, I'm sorry. Qin Huayong's voice was not loud, but it was heavy. He rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Father, I don't blame you. Qin Wanru said softly. Her eyes were calm and peaceful, without any of the anger and agitation of Qin Yuru. It was as if she was the older sister, dealing with everything calmly and calmly. Taking a deep breath, Qin Huaiyong raised his head and looked at Qin Wanru. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He paused for a while and said, "From now on, the matters of Yulon Pavilion have nothing to do with you." This meant that Madame D could no longer interfere in Qin Wanru's affairs, nor could she use other reasons to torture Qin Wanru in the name of an elder. Nanny Yu's heart skipped a beat, and she almost jumped up in excitement. This meant that it would be of great benefit to Mississippi, but Duke Yong's mansion, what will happen? Qin Wanru looked a little worried. Di Yen was here today and he saw it. Even if I don't say anything, I believe that Duke Yong's mansion will not interfere in this matter. Moreover, this is a matter of our inner court. A trace of anger flashed across Qin Huaiyong's face, but he suppressed it. This was indeed not a good time for him to fall out with Duke Yong's mansion. "Thank you, father." Qin Wanru didn't stand on ceremony this time. She stood up with difficulty with the help of the chair, and bowed deeply to Qin Huaiyong. Then she raised her head, and there was a trace of childish happiness on her face. It could be seen that she was really happy. But in fact, it was not difficult to explain. Anyone who met a person like Madame D would feel tired even if they had to pretend to be obedient. It was the best if they could not get involved with Madame D. But Mother has to deal with Madame. But soon the smile on her little face faded. Qin Wanru frowned, and her face was full of worry. Mother is pregnant now. If Madame D deliberately made trouble like what happened in the kitchen, and the target was the people around Mother, how could Mother rest at ease to raise the baby? The two matters were implicated together without anyone noticing. "I have arrangements for your mother. Let the two concubines worry about the following affairs, and your mother only needs to take care of them." Qin Huaiyong had long thought about this matter. Old grandma was old and in poor health, so she definitely could not take care of the internal affairs. But if Madame D made trouble every day, Shui Ruolin's current health couldn't bear it. The two concubines would be the best. They would be in charge of the internal affairs, and Shui Ruolin would only be in charge of them. Originally, it was just an idea. After all, he had to take Duke Yong's mansion into consideration. But what happened just now made Qin Huaiyong decisively make up his mind. Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows, looked at Qin Huaiyong expectantly, and said, "If you can get the title of honorary lady recognized by the Ministry of Rights, even if you are officially in charge of the family, or if you are not well, you can give the power to the two concubines. After all, you will be rewarded by the Imperial court." If this was really the case, things in the backyard would indeed be sorted out, and Madame D would no longer find a chance to target Shui Ruolin. Even Duke Yong's mansion would not be capricious and blame Shui Ruolin. After the Ministry of Rights officially recognized it, the officials in the Imperial Censorate would have nothing to say. Of course, Qin Huaiyong was happy to see this result, but after thinking about it, he still felt that it would not work. He was not a person who had made great contributions, so how could he let both his wives get the title of honorary lady? After thinking about it, he looked at Qin Wanru's pure and expectant eyes, and finally didn't refuse. Instead, he nodded and said, "Okay, I will give it a try." Qin Wanru smiled, and her smile was like a blooming flower. She didn't know where her confidence came from, but she said with certainty, "Father, you can definitely do it. If so, of course, it will be the best." Qin Huaiyong was helpless against his little daughter's blind confidence. He stood up and said, "Have a good rest first, and go and apply the medicine." "Yes, father." Although Qin Wanru's face was pale, she looked good, and her pale smiling face made people feel sorry for her. As she spoke, she held Nanny Yu's hand and was ready to send Qin Huaiyong out. Qin Huaiyong hurriedly stopped her. "Go back and have a rest, I am leaving, don't send me out again." "Then, father, don't forget it," Qin Wanru said and stopped obediently. "Okay, I won't forget it." Qin Huaiyong nodded and strode away. "Miss, I think the general doesn't take it to heart." Nanny Yu saw Qin Huaiyong's expression clearly. After Qin Huaiyong left, she said uneasily, "It seems that the general is just coaxing Second Mississippi. If she could really get the title of honorary lady for Madame Shui, it would be a great thing." This meant that even if Madame Shui went to Duke Yong's mansion with Madame D, she would not be suppressed by Madame D. But this was too good. How could it be possible? She was afraid that Qin Wanru would think too well and be too disappointed, so Nanny Yu thought that she had to let her miss be prepared early, and it was better to tell the truth. "I know." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and helped Nanny Yu into the inner room and sat on the bed. Yu Jie came in, took off the cloth that she had casually wrapped around her wound, and wrapped the wound with a piece of white silk with ointment on it. These ointment were made by Qin Wanru herself, not those sent by the doctor before. The doctor's medicine was too common, and the effect was not as good as the one she made herself. "Since Miss knows, why do you still mention it to the general?" Nanny Yu helped her and asked. "Only by mentioning it can father know that there is such a thing, and then he will mention it at the right time. Sometimes it is impossible not to mention it, but it is very possible to mention it." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully, "Miss, do you mean to report it to the general first, and when the opportunity comes, the general will naturally mention it?" Yu Jie was a smart girl. Although she did not understand Nanny Yu's question, she could explain it according to her words. Seeing that she clearly didn't know anything, but she explained it so well, even Nanny Yu, who had a lot on her mind, couldn't help but burst into laughter. She gently patted her head and said with a smile, "This girl." "Nanny, am I wrong?" Yu Jie raised her head and said unwillingly. In the past, Mingqiu Nun often reasoned with her like this, always saying some specious words to make her listen. After a long time, she would also say something that sounded very reasonable, and many things could be connected. "Yes, you're right." Looking at this girl's mischievous look, Nanny Yu's tightened heart relaxed, and she could not stop laughing. For a moment, the room became cheerful, and the previous gloominess was swept away. Qin Wanru also smiled and looked at her calf, which was tied up. The injury on her calf was not so painful anymore. Mentioning the honorary title to her father did not mean that her father should immediately go to the emperor to ask for it. She just wanted to imprint this matter in her father's heart, and then add a few things to supplement it, and when the time came, it would naturally happen. Now it sounded like a ridiculous matter, but it might not be really ridiculous. Opportunities could be encountered, and they could also take the initiative to find it. What they needed now was the timing. When Qin Huaiyong came to Madame D's courtyard, she was still in a rage in the room. The little servant girl who was half kneeling to feed Madame D medicine was thrown in the courtyard, half dead, and her whole body was covered with blood. She was motionless, and no one knew whether she was dead or alive. Qin Huaiyong rushed into the room, and when he saw Qin Yuru was also there, he said coldly, "Get out." "Father." Qin Yuru was complaining to Madame D, and when she saw Qin Huaiyong come in, she shivered. She did not expect that Qin Huaiyong would ask her to leave without saying anything, and she could not help but be stunned. "Go." Qin Huaiyong's whole body was emitting cold air, and his eyes were even colder as he looked at his eldest daughter coldly. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.